I would like to call to order the November 21, 2023 meeting of the West Palm Beach Planning Board. Mr. Clerk, if you kindly call the roll.
Mr. Steve Mayans,
Present?
Mr. Peter Pivko,
Here.
Mr. Will Carente,
Present.
Mr. Patrick Mayfield.
Present.
Will the record reflect Mr. Andre Paradello is not in attendance? Ms. Deborah Rain?
Here.
Mr. Gene Marsai Jr.
Present.
Mr. Sam Fish is also not in attendance. May the record reflect as well.
Right, next order of business is approval of October 17, 2023 minutes. Has everyone had the opportunity to review them? Are there any changes or corrections? And if not, I'm looking for a motion for approval. So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is the report of the planning staff. Ms. Van.
Good evening, Board. Members, Angela Van, Planning and Zoning Administrator. So give you a quick...
Angela, if you could speak into the microphone, I'm not hearing you very well.
I will. Quick update on the cases that the City Commission heard since your last meeting. This was the dock meeting because everything on the agenda just about was approval of a dock. This is a dock at 3014 North Flagler Drive. It was to build a 165-foot long dock. You heard this at your September 19, 2023 meeting. You approved it 7-0, and Commission approved this on November the 13th by a vote of 5-0. The Laro Dock, I think it's 1919 North Flagler Drive. It's a general address. You heard this, to build a 193-foot long dock for the Laro apartment and residential project. You approved this again on 9/19/2023, and that was also a vote of 7-0. And approval by City Commission on November the 13th, 2023, and it was a 5-0 vote. The next was for 2914 North Flagler Drive, also another dock. This was to build a 164-foot long dock. You heard this and approved this also on your September 19th meeting, and the Commission approved this and November 13th also meeting, a vote of 5-0. And the last dock was 4417 South Flagler Drive. This was to actually build a boat lift that was outside the middle 1/3. You heard this also at your September 19th meeting. You approved it by 7-0 vote, and the Commission approved this at the November 13th meeting by a vote of 5-0, and that includes staff's presentation.
All right, any questions of staff? Thank you very much. All right, next on the agenda are remarks by the chairperson, which I have none other than to wish everyone, especially staff and my fellow board members, a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. We next turn to the declaration of ex parte communications. Let me begin by saying that as to all matters this evening, I have had no ex parte communications. I have received no written communications. I have conducted no investigations. I have made no site visits. I have received no expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made a part of the record. Let me start with you, Deborah.
As it attends to the agenda this evening, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. And I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you so much, Peter.
With regards to all the item in tonight's agenda, I have not had any ex parte communications. I have not received any written communications. I have not conducted an investigation, nor have I not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Will.
As to all matters on the agenda this evening, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you. Gene?
As to all items on the agenda, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you. Patrick?
With respect to tonight's agenda items, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you so much. That brings us then to the swearing in of the speakers. Would everyone who plans to speak or offer testimony this evening please stand up and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful? You may be seated. Thank you. So we move to our continue cases, and we're going to begin with Planning Board cases number 1973 and 1973A. As part of the presentation, do you also want to talk about the code revision case as well, or is that going to be a
Yes,
separate
it's all going to
presentation?
be
Okay, all
presented
three then.
together. Yes, they were
Please
all
proceed.
continued. Okay, good evening, Linda Louis, Principal Planner for the record. So this is a three-part request, city-initiated request, for the proposed expansion of the Curry Mixed-Use District boundaries. The applications that will be presented tonight include Planning Board Case Number 1973 for the future land use map amendment to expand the mixed-use district, Planning Board Case Number 1973A for the associated rezoning, as well as Code Revision Case Number 2306 to amend the zoning code text to include the expansion area. So to start off, the city has three mixed-use districts, all located within the north end of the city. The mixed-use districts are the Broadway Mixed-Use District, the Northwood Mixed-Use District, and the Curry Mixed-Use District, which is the district considered for the applications moving forward tonight. So the Curry Mixed-Use District, also known as CMUD, is a mixed-use redevelopment area. The current boundaries of CMUD, which is shown in this dark yellow color, is comprised of approximately 50.7 acres. The future land use of the district is mixed use, or MU, and the zoning of the CMUD is a CMUD zoning subdistrict, which I will go over in more detail later in my presentation. So just a little bit of history on the district. In 2002, the CMUD was created to stimulate growth and redevelopment activity in the north end of the city. A development cap was also adopted for the entire district, and these caps are 4,065 residential units and 2.3 million square feet of commercial. These development caps cannot be exceeded within the district and are adopted into the city's comprehensive plan, which guides the land use within the city. The maximum height was also limited to 4 stories. So in 2014, the CMUD regulations went through its first major amendment, and this was the result of a lack of development activity within the district. So as you can see in this aerial image from 2023, there was still a significant amount of vacant undeveloped land in the area. Development in the district was not financially feasible for developers, and this was the result of an increased construction costs, as also the high cost of waterfront properties, and additionally, the adopted development cap for the district could not be achieved with the 4-story height limitation. So to address these issues, the building height was increased to 8 stories by right, and a building height bonus program was established to achieve the additional height up to a maximum of 15 stories within the district. The regulations were also modified to establish building typologies and the reorganization of the area into sub-districts. And these three sub-districts, which were established to accommodate the increases in building height, was the core, which is highlighted in this 2014 CMUD sub-district plan. It's highlighted in yellow, that's the core. We have the transition as well as the edge sub-district located at the northern boundary of the district. In 2021, the regulations went through its second major amendment to further increase building heights within the height bonus program was offered, and that increased the building height to 350 feet. In a nutshell, this was the result of the continued lack of development activity within the district, as well as a single developer purchasing most of the properties within the district. So the developer, Jeff Green, had purchased most of the properties within CMUD, and he also approached city staff at the time with a development proposal. And his development proposal had height increases that were established beyond the height limits of the CMUD regulations. So that started the whole discussion on increasing building heights even more within the district. So the proposal to increase the building height went through a series of public workshops and meetings, and the amendment was formally adopted in November of 2021. Other major amendments include changing the measurement of building height from stories 2 feet to offer developers more flexibility with the floor to ceiling height, as well as the number of stories provided. And the original core sub-district, as you can see here, highlighted in yellow, was further split into Core 1A, Core 1, and Core 2 to accommodate the building height increases within the district. The development regulations were also simplified for development flexibility, and since the amendments were adopted, this had stimulated a reinterest in, CMUD and redevelopment within the area. So fast forward to today. The proposal to expand the current boundaries of CMUD is now being considered. With the amount of growth that the city has seen in the last several years, there has been an increased amount of development pressure. And the proposal to expand the boundaries of CMUD actually began in the spring of 2022, and public workshops were held to obtain preliminary feedback. And then on May 8th of this year, the proposal to expand CMUD went to a Mayor Commission work session to present the feedback from the public outreach and to get direction from the Mayor and Commissioners. At the end of the work session, staff was given the direction to proceed with processing the expansion for CMUD. 2 additional public workshops were held to finalize the CMUD South expansion boundary, and the community engagements associated with the CMUD South expansion project is also detailed in the community engagement report for CMUD South, which has been included as part of the planning board packet. So this slide shows the preliminary and final CMUD boundaries. During the initial stages of the expansion project, the preliminary boundaries were established, and it looked like the image to the left here. The expansion area, the preliminary one, was comprised of 29 parcels totaling 29.48 acres. The majority of parcels along North Flagler Drive were professional office residential plan developments with condominium ownership. And based upon the preliminary feedback from the residents that participated in the public workshops, the concerns that were raised with the proposed expansion and increased building heights, these concerns included increased traffic, noise, shadowing, and so forth. So the general consensus was that most of the parcels along North Flagler Drive would be excluded from CMUD South, since the majority of PDs, or planned developments, and condo owners did not have a desire to be part of the expansion. The feedback from the public outreach also determined that the redevelopment efforts were also needed along North Dixie Highway. So based upon this feedback, staff reconfigured the CMUD South expansion area to eliminate the majority of planned developments along Flagler Drive, and the area along North Dixie Highway was also expanded. So the final CMUD South expansion area is comprised of 24 parcels in total. totaling 17.35 acres. It's bounded by Pine Street to the north, 14th Street to the south, North Flagler Drive to the east, and North Dixie Highway to the west. As mentioned, most of the PDs were excluded. The only exception is Flagler Point, which is the parcel located at the northern end of the expansion area, and it provides for the contiguous link of the expansion area for CMUD. Flagler Point will remain zoned as a planned development. However, if the condo owners agree upon and decide that they want to rezone to a CMUD zoning subdistrict, the residents could submit for rezoning application to do so. So what this means, if the expansion area is adopted, the CMUD regulations would be adopted for the parcels within the expansion areas with exception to the Flagler Point parcel, unless it's rezoned. And this would allow those parcels that are rezoned the greater building heights through the district's height incentive program. So just to provide some information on the zoning subdistricts and the height incentives within CMUD, the CMUD is currently split into 5 zoning subdistricts. The zoning subdistricts are Core 1A, Core 1, Core 2, Transition, and Edge. A base height is established for each of the zoning subdistricts. So it's 111 feet for the Core 1A, Core 1, and Core 2. The transition base height is 85 feet, and the edge subdistrict height is limited to 36 stories or 60 feet, just because it's located at the northern edge of CMUD, which is also bounded by single-family residential to the north. So the location of the subdistricts within CMUD are identified by the color in this image with the maximum allowable building heights with the height bonus. Typically, the tallest buildings are found within the center of CMUD and also along North Flagler Drive. The additional bonus height above the base height can only be achieved by applying the height incentives provided in the program, and these are the current incentives offered in the program. The incentives also have a maximum height bonus. So for example, if a developer chose workforce housing or the Curry Park improvements, the additional bonus height is capped for each incentive, and it's up to the developer to apply for additional height incentives in the program to achieve the desired height for their project. So again, if the expansion area is approved, the parcels that are rezoned to CMUD would also be eligible to apply for the building height through the height bonus program. The first application for the expansion is the future land use map amendment. The parcels within the affected area currently has a future land use designation of multifamily and commercial. In order to include the expansion area into the CMUD, the future land use designation has to be changed to mixed use, which is a compatible future land use designation for the mixed use districts in the city. So ultimately, if the expansion area is approved, the future land use map will look like this, which is the periwinkle color that you see in this proposed future land use map. The justification for the expansion to the MU future land use or mixed use future land use is that it's a logical expansion of the existing land use pattern along Flagler Drive, and it's also in close proximity to the downtown. It's less than a quarter mile away. It's also a convergence of the mixed use future land use with the downtown's urban central business district future land use designation, and these two future land use designations share a lot of similarities in terms of development characteristics and patterns. And finally, the purpose to also expand the MU is to revitalize and encourage infill redevelopment. So the state statutes require that any future land use map amendment must go through a level of service analysis to determine if there is sufficient capacity with a public facility servicing the site and the area to accommodate the land use change. And these public facilities analysis includes potable water, wastewater, public schools, roadways, and so forth. The analysis for the change in the future land use is important because sufficient capacity means that the existing public facilities can accommodate the increase in service demand with the land use change. So with the proposed CMUD South expansion, the adopted development caps of 4,065 residential units and 2.3 million square feet of commercial is not going to change, which means that the adopted development cap would include the expansion area. The cap is just going to encompass a larger land area. So currently, only 29% of the residential cap and 6.3% of the commercial cap has been vested, so there is still a significant amount of ceiling that can be met with the expansion. The table here is staff's analysis of the comparison of the current and proposed maximum development potentials with the CMUD South expansion area under the current or the existing and proposed future land use designation. In summary, the future land use change to mixed use will reduce the amount of development permitted for the entire area of the proposed CMUD. Versus just the CMUD South expansion area were to maintain its existing future land use. This would have a positive effect on the public facilities that service the area. So basically, in a nutshell, this is saying that there will be a reduction in 141 dwelling units and a reduction in 421,433 square feet of commercial use. The next application is the rezoning of the parcels within the expansion area for consistency with the future land use designation change to mixed use to allow for development under the CMUD regulations. The parcels within the expansion area are currently zoned professional office residential, general commercial, and professional office residential plan development. The rezoning would rezone the parcels along North Flagler Drive with exception to the Flagler Point, which is zone PORPD, to Core 1, and the other parcels within the expansion area would be rezoned to CMUD transition. The rezoning of the parcels within the proposed expansion area accounts for 10.11 acres. And as mentioned, the PORPD zoning of the Flagler Point condominium will remain untouched for the rezoning. In terms of staff's analysis, the analysis looked at the zoning and general development pattern of the current CMUD and expansion area and the areas in close proximity to the CMUD boundaries. In terms of staff's findings, CMUD and CMUD South expansion area is in close proximity to downtown, and the development pattern in the areas is also consistent with the high-rise buildings that connect the downtown to CMUD, which is currently separated by just a few parcels. In analyzing the appropriate rezoning classifications for the parcels, as mentioned, the highest densities and intensities is along North Flagler Drive, south of 26th Street. And therefore it was a logical rezoning of the parcels along Flagler Drive to Core 1. The parcels along North Flagler Drive, as well as not fronting on Flagler Drive, would be designated transition, and this is more of a compatible, it's more compatible with the development of shorter buildings and densities along Dixie. It also provides for a building height and intensity transition from the more intense zoning of the east side of CMUD. Finally, the rezoning of the parcels to CMUD sub-district is consistent with the future land use change to mixed use. The third and final application is the text amendment to the zoning and land development regulations to include the proposed expansion area into the Curry mixed use district regulations for consistency with the other two applications. The changes to the zoning code will only affect Chapter 94-215, which are the CMUD regulations. The primary purpose of the text amendment is to accommodate the proposed expansion area into CMUD, and these changes include redefining the boundaries of CMUD with the proposed expansion area by text reference, modifying the regulating plans or maps to include the expansion area, increasing the minimum and maximum setback range along Dixie Highway to provide more space for landscaping and streetscaping. As noted earlier, this was one of the results of the public output information gathering, where it's the public's desire to revitalize the side of North Dixie Highway, and one of the improvements desired was the improved landscape and streetscaping. So a larger setback could accommodate more landscaping and streetscaping along North Dixie Highway. The text amendment will also provide for 2 new height bonus incentives to provide additional public benefits within CMUD. And these 2 new incentives are the Flagler Drive seawall improvements and Flagler Drive roadway improvements. These improvements resulted from a cooperation and coordination with the Engineering Services Department. These improvements are deemed critical to the city because of increased sea level rise as well as the aging infrastructure. So a way to speed up the improvements would be to include these as incentives to the CMUD regulations. So the first incentive is the Flagler Drive seawall improvements. It requires the developer to contribute funds to the city's seawall improvement fund. The incentive height is based on the lineal footage of seawall improvement, and it increases incrementally by 50 feet to a maximum of 500 feet. And the contribution to the fund must be made prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The second incentive is the Flagler Drive roadway improvement. It's very similar to the previous incentive. It requires the developer to contribute to funds to the city's Flagler Drive roadway improvement fund. The developer will receive additional height based on the lineal footage of roadway improvement, which is listed here. In this table, the eligible area along North Flagler Drive for the roadway improvement is between 26th Street and Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, and the contribution must be made prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. So finally, the final amendment to the zoning code is a text amendment that isn't directly related to the CMUD South expansion, but it's to clarify the language of the Northwood Road extension incentive. There's some negotiation going on with the developer for the parcel that is that will be for the developer and the project that will be utilizing this incentive, and there has to be more clarity. And based on discussions with the city's law department as well as the development team, it was agreed upon that the Northwood Road extension deadlines would be deleted. And since the city is the responsible party to complete the work, it just makes more sense to delete these deadlines. And also, it was agreed upon that the amount that would be provided to fund the roadway extension between the developer and the city would be provided in this text amendment. So the text amendment that was agreed upon between the law department as well as the development team for the project that may be presented this November to the planning board. There's been a slight modification in the text amendment that was presented to the board in the packet, but it now reads, this incentive only applies to the Core 1A parcels on either side of the extended Northwood Road from North Dixie Highway to the entrance of Curry Park. The developer seeking to utilize this incentive will be permitted a maximum height of 350 feet in exchange for the payment to the city of no more than $6 million to cover the cost of the Northwood Road extension, along with dedication of property necessary for the roadway extension. The utilization of this incentive will be evidenced by a written agreement approved by the City Commission, which addresses parcels,
Details.
which addresses parcel details, timing of the transaction, and other terms. Regarding public comment, staff has received a number of objection letters, which have been included in the planning board packet. Most of the objection letters have come from the residents of Flagler Point. And since the packet had been delivered, staff has received additional letters from Flagler Point. These are objection letters as well as one support letter, and those have been printed out and presented before each board member. So despite the number of objection letters received, staff has to analyze the applications based on the set standards for the future land use map amendment, the rezoning, as well as the text amendment. And based on staff's findings and analysis, staff is recommending approval of Planning Board Case Number 1973 for the future land use amendment, as staff has found that it complies with the Florida statutes as well as it complies with the policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff is also recommending approval of Planning Board Case Number 1973A for the rezoning, as staff has found that the application complies with the rezoning standards of Section 9432 of the zoning code, and staff is recommending approval of Code Revision Case Number 2306, as staff has also found that it complies with the amendment standards of Section 9432 of our zoning code. And that concludes staff's presentation. If there are any questions?
Okay, before we get to the questions, anyone who wishes to speak this evening needs to complete one of these cards. I've only received a half dozen so far. So if you are planning to speak, you need to complete one of these cards and give it to the clerk, okay? So any questions of staff? Let me start on this side with Patrick. Go ahead.
Thanks. I have two questions. So, and I may have missed it in your analysis, but in establishing the changes that occurred between the preliminary and current proposed boundary, what were can you elaborate more on the reasons why the parcels along Flagler Drive, North Flagler, were omitted?
Okay. Okay, so that's slide 5. Okay, so basically, a lot of the parcels along North Flagler Drive were comprised of planned developments. It is complicated when you have to work with planned developments because of condo ownership and, you know, the unity in having the property owners agree to rezone or not to rezone or to move forward. So it just made sense. There was also, going through the public workshops, that most of the residents didn't want to be a part of the expansion area, so they were eliminated from the final boundaries for CMUD South. So that's the reason why there was no desire for them to be a part of it, as well as the complexities with dealing with planned developments.
I see. There were no specific objections that were given in terms of rejecting the...
Most of it was based on, you know, the impacts associated with increased building heights and density, traffic, noise, loss of privacy. So those were some of the concerns. You know, obviously with the CMUD, with the current regulations of CMUD, we're talking about increased heights. And obviously there was some concerns with regards to increased building heights.
And it's increased beyond what is currently existing. So many of those structures are quite high already within the planned unit developments.
Yes, I mean, for example, Flagler Point is 112 feet in height. There are other taller buildings along North Flagler Drive outside of this expansion area that are even taller. So, you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But these are also older developments that had been established for some time as well.
Got it. I had one additional question about the roadway improvement incentive. If you could go to that slide about the linear footage, I was confused by that.
I'm sorry, which incentive?
The roadway improvement, Flagler Drive roadway incentive.
It's like your 4th or 5th before the last.
The chart where you were giving the...
Let me show you this, Mr. Mayfield. Rick Green, Development Services Director. So I've been working with the developer's lawyer, Alan Bregman, as well as Nancy Urchek, who's our city attorney, who's been working on this development agreement. So we have an agreement that's in the works right now. And again, what we're trying to do is have Northwood Road extended from Dixie to tie into the new entrance to Curry Park. There are 2 parcels that would benefit from this extension, and those are the 2 1A parcels identified in the green outline, so in the 350. Those 2 are considered core 1A parcels. This core 1A parcel to the south would have to utilize the other incentives that are inherent with the CMUD regulations. So as we began the discussions, obviously there are city-owned properties within this right-of-way. There are properties that are owned by Jeff Green. So we have to do a swap of properties to make sure that the right-of-way is available for this Northwood Road extension. And then in addition, there are some roads that would have to be abandoned, some utilities capped off. So we're working on that language now. The intent is, once all of that happens, and we've got a time frame in which we're trying to achieve that work, then once that happens, the developer would be entitled to a height of 350 feet. There are two payments we're going to request from the developers, and this is getting far beyond the scope of the mixed-use district, but two payments we're going to ask for. One is an initial payment to do the design for the Northwood Road extension. Once we have that, we'll ask the developer to fund the balance of the $6 million. Then we will go out to bid. We'll get bids from different contractors to build a road. And during our discussions with the developers team and our team, we thought it would be more prudent for us to build a road, the city, as opposed to giving that responsibility to Jeff Green. So that's the reason you have the change in language that Linda presented earlier tonight. That allows the city to take that obligation. He still has to front that money in order for us to move forward. Once that final payment to a maximum amount of $6 million is made, then he will be allowed to move forward with a development of 350 to the north of the road and then one to the south. He has submitted plans for the south portion of this roadway. You may see that as early as next month, at next month's meeting. But again, the payment will have to be made before he's allowed to move forward with the building permit and CO.
Yeah, I was actually referring to the other incentive along North Flagler, where you provide the linear footage requirements.
Yeah, the seawall and then the roadway.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But that was a helpful explanation of the other
Yeah,
one. Thank you.
the intent of that, so we added two incentives that we did not have as part of the regular CMUD incentives. So what we're saying is that we recognize that there's a need to repave and basically improve Flagler Drive from Palm Beach Lakes to 26th Street.
Right.
So as an incentive, we're going to allow a developer to pay per linear foot of lane mile for that improvement. So
Per
is that-
linear foot, so the first one starts at 5,000 linear feet, so they have to pave an entire mile to get that in?
No, it would be per the, can you go back to 13? Okay. Put my glasses on, okay. So if he paves and improves 5,867 linear feet, that could be several lanes, it could be one lane continuous. We would have to
I see.
work that out with engineering. They would be entitled to 20 feet. So the more linear feet they do, the greater height they get.
Okay, so it's per lane, not the whole length
Correct,
of the road?
correct.
Okay.
And really, all of this is trying to predicate this improvement based on a value of 1 foot of height is equivalent to $25,000. So as a developer comes in to build, whether it's CMUD or CMUD South, the intent really is to find out what the needs of the resident are with, hypothetically, with the exception of Northwood Road, with all costs being the same, the residents may say, well, we want Flagler Drive improved, we want the seawall improved, we want improvements to Curry Park. Then hopefully we can encourage the developer to contribute to that specific fund in order to benefit the residents and what the true needs are.
And is there any thought out there that the Flagler Drive through the district would be increased from 2 to 4 lanes?
That is not in the plans, no.
Okay,
Any other questions, Patrick?
that's it,
Not
thanks.
Jean.
Does the city have the subsequent opposition and approval letters that came in after the packet was submitted to the board?
Yep, that should have been printed by the secretary and presented to you, in front of you.
I don't have a copy.
No, I don't have copies of the additional letters.
New letters that were.
There were about 6 additional objection letters from the Flagler Point residents, stating that they oppose the rezoning.
Okay.
And there was 1 support letter from a Flagler Point resident stating that they support the proposed amendments.
Okay.
I think Julius may have it.
And the next question, the incentive language with the 6 million, is the contribution from the developer, it's a minimum of 6 million?
No, it's 6 million, just 6 million.
Okay, because the language, I think it read,
Maximum.
was it no more? Maybe to be no less, correct? Or,
It's not going to be more than 6 million.
okay,
Okay.
It would be a maximum contribution of 6 million. If the cost of the roadway extend beyond 6 million, it would be the city's obligation to pay that difference.
got it.
The developer is obligated just the 6 million.
Thank you.
Okay, Gene, any other questions you have?
No other questions.
Okay, Will, any questions of staff?
Yeah, so on the roadway improvement, is it just paving, or are you doing beautification? Are you changing the sidewalk, the walkways, like, you know,
It would be repaving.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just basic resurfacing of the
Yes,
roadway?
resurfacing.
No infrastructure changes? or-
Remilling, whatever the engineering services department specifies that needs improvement.
Okay. Question on the choices that they have. If they select workforce housing,
Mm-hmm.
they actually have to provide the workforce housing. They can't pay into a fund.
That
where
is correct.
workforce
There's
housing goes elsewhere.
like a percentage of workforce housing that you can apply for, and that will give you the amount of additional height. So if you choose, like, let's just say 20% to provide 20% of workforce housing, you can achieve X number of feet established by code. If you choose to do more, then, you know, obviously you would obtain more height
Okay.
through that program.
And in your timeline, you said back in 2002, that area was limited to 4 stories.
That was the original code.
So how were buildings like, what is it, the Slade? Is it the Slade? I always get confused between the Slade and the Strand. Which
Well,
one's up north? The
For,
Slade?
okay, the Slade is actually south and it's outside the boundaries of CMUD, so they weren't subject to the CMUD regulations.
I got,
when this
okay.
was
Which is
first-
why Flagler Point also is 111 feet,
Yes,
because it was
they're
outside
outside of the
CMUD.
boundaries. And of course, they were all planned developments, so you could also seek waivers that could increase the height as well to these parcels.
Okay. And then, last, so the city had several meetings with the neighborhoods. There, I think in your packet said there was four meetings?
We had public workshops that
Okay.
were advertised, and we also had mailers sent out to all property owners within 500 feet of CMUD, as well as the proposed expansion area. So they've been notified that if they had an interest or they wanted to express their feelings about the proposed expansion area, they would be invited to these public workshops.
Okay. And then there was also a subsequent city commission meeting regarding this as well?
It was a mayor commission workshop. So the mayor commission workshop is provided to give staff directive on whether or not we should move forward with the proposal to expand the CMUD south boundaries. So we were looking for direction. So yes, it was presented at a mayor commission workshop with our preliminary findings, and the direction that staff was given by the mayor and commission workshop at that conclusion of the meeting was to move forward with the expansion project.
And in the timeframes of those meetings, did you have the same or similar number of objections?
Yes, and again, most of the objections came from the Flagler Point residents, which is located at the northern end of the proposed CMUD South expansion area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Peter, any questions?
Linda, would you know the date that Flagler Point was either approved or built?
It was, so Flagler Point was built back in 2001. Yes, it was
So-
built in 2001.
I'm assuming the zoning then was some that would not permit a high-rise building in that property.
So basically, it was rezoned to planned development. They sought waivers to allow them the additional height for up to the height that they currently have, which is 9 stories or 112 feet. Typically, the underlying zoning, which is POR, limits the height to 40 feet or 2 feet in height for each 1 foot in setback from the side and rear property lines. So that would require a setback of 56 feet. Currently, the setbacks for the Flagler Point property is 26 feet to the west and 38 feet to the east. So yes, they did seek waivers from the,
A
to
sizable
the height.
increase.
Increase, Height.
So they were the tallest building in that area for a number of years.
correct.
Correct, okay.
Any other questions, Peter?
I just have one,
Or sorry, Deborah?
excuse me, for clarification. When you talked about the expansion for CMUD on the south end, and you mentioned some, the caps, I
The
think it was.
residential caps?
Mhm.
Yes.
That was for the 4,000 plus residential?
Yes, 4,065 residential units and 2.3 million square feet of commercial. This is an adopted cap by the comprehensive plan, and it's not expected to change with, if the expansion area is approved. We're going to maintain that same development cap.
Okay. It can drop lower, but it won't increase.
We
Although
can't
just-
increase
you
it
can't-
unless there's a detailed level of service analysis. It requires, an extensive analysis of the public facilities. It would require,
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
that.
Go ahead.
So Flagler Point was originally built as an apartment, correct? And they converted to condos?
Condo is a type of ownership, so it was a residential building, and
Right, so it was owned by a developer who rented all the units, and then it was converted, it was legally converted to a condominium.
Right, it was originally apartments, is what
Right.
he's saying.
Yeah.
So my question, would the height have been different if it was originally proposed as a condominium as opposed to an apartment?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because of the restrictions within the district?
there are restrictions within the district.
Okay,
If you choose a planned development, you can apply for waivers that could potentially increase the height.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Will.
So a follow-up question on the setbacks. So, if we approve the CMUD, you said that there is gonna be changes to minimum and maximum setbacks?
That is only for North Dixie Highway. The minimum setbacks are established within the district regulations or sub-district regulations. We're only proposing under this amendment to change the setback distance or range along North Dixie Highway. And that is because it is an FDOT roadway, it's controlled by FDOT. It's more difficult to work with FDOT. So a way of addressing some of the desires that had been identified in the public workshops was to increase the amount of landscaping and streetscaping. So by increasing that setback, you can accommodate potentially more landscaping and streetscape improvements along Dixie without, moving into the right-of-way.
Right. So based on the code as it's currently written, is it really based on what the developer would propose? Like if you look at the Temple site and you look at the site next to Flagler Point, what is the setback off of their property line that something could be built? Or is that a basis on how the plan is submitted, proposed, and sort of there's some give and take to come to
There
that
are
number?
established minimum setbacks, so if you're talking about the minimum setback for the side, so what would be, sandwiching Flagler Point, the minimum setback is 5 feet. If the design of the building was, had a greater setback of 5 feet, then that obviously, would increase the setbacks. There is no maximum setback established for these side property lines. It's just the minimum.
Okay,
He has one
go
more.
ahead.
I have one follow-up question. As a planned unit development, are there any rules codified to how far you can ask for a waiver in terms of height? If you're applying as a planned unit development, is there currently anything in the code that tells you how high you can apply for a waiver?
It does not.
So it's purely ad hoc per the project, the
Yeah,
requests of the
it's
developer?
evaluated on a case-by-case basis, so waivers are looked at individually. So if, the height is really up to approval of the waivers would be up to city commission, but there is no,
And once those waivers are approved, that height is cemented, it cannot be changed without further,
unless you want to go lower than that.
understood?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, any other questions of staff? And if not, we'd like to hear from the public. Just a few things. Once again, if you have not submitted a card, we need that card in order to call you to the podium. If there's anyone who's arrived after you were sworn in and wish to speak, I'd ask that you stand up now so you can be sworn in. So this is for anyone who submitted a card or wishes to offer testimony that was not previously sworn in. If you could please raise your right hand, do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be truthful? Yes. Thank you. You may be seated. Every speaker will have 3 minutes. Please respect the time limit. When your 3 minutes are up, please sit down so someone else gets their turn as well. I'm going to call two to each podium as we get started. So at this podium, Judy Lebavitt and Carol Mead, the two at this podium. At the next podium, Fran Perchek and Joanna Elm. So if those two ladies could be at this podium. Please come forward. Oop. I may not have the right key, is that right? Oh, thank you. Excuse me, Judy Lebavitt, you're not here on this one, right? I'm so sorry, that's my error. All right, please someone come forward wherever, and you can get, ma'am, you can get started, go ahead. Please state your name for the record.
I'm going to go first.
Okay, go ahead.
We're three together.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Carol Mead, and I live at Flagler Point. We did a survey in September of 2023 to the residents of Flagler Point, and we had a more than 50% majority of people respond. The question was, what's your preferred development height for the 1717 and 1701 property south of us? More than 55% of the people said they want to keep it to 111-foot max, which is the same as Flagler Point. Allow up to the Core 2, that was about 20%. Allow up to Core 1, 306 feet, 11%. About 14% gave other comments. Most of those other comments were maximum of 9 stories, same as Flagler Point. A couple of pieces of information. No construction, they're too close to my unit, I would have to move out. Allow height no higher than the current height. Our building will look out of place if 2 monstrosities are built to the south and north of us. So just some information. I'd like to also address standard number 7, adverse impacts to property values. How can you possibly not see that a 112-foot building in a construction zone for more than 5 years with 300-foot buildings on either side of us will not have a negative impact to the value of Flagler Point owners during construction? Who will want to rent or buy units at Flagler Point during the many years of construction, and how many years will it take for the values to increase after construction is finished? With a 45% investors' ownership at Flagler Point, subject to a minimum of 30% loss, we're talking about a 11,000 per year loss at 30%. That's what happens if you lose your view. It's about a 30% loss. At that rate, times the 80 units that are invested, we're looking at $806,000 a year of loss of income. At a 50% rental loss, we're talking about $16,000, almost $17,000 a month. That equates to $1.3 million of loss a year. At 100%, for some people who may not be able to sell or rent their units, we're talking about $2.6 million a year of loss for a unit. We will have shadows covering our amenities that will certainly have a negative impact. I have a shadow study here, you have it in your packet, that shows we will be in complete shadows from a building that's 300 feet to the south of us. According to a survey of the NAHB, multifamily high-rise units take 28 months to build. You add an extra 100 feet to that, you're talking another 12 to 14 months of construction nuisance. Flagler Point owners, especially investors, stand to lose significant value during multiple years of construction.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your time. Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Fran Perchik. I am a resident on North Flagler Drive, and I've spoken with you before. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. I'm concerned about the proposed zoning change. Allowing taller buildings will not be compatible with the neighborhood to the south, and will have permanent detrimental effects to the Lake Worth Lagoon. Just really quick background about me. Although I am not speaking on their behalf this evening, I work for a renowned conservation organization. My background includes extensive work on issues of incompatible development and impacts to sensitive ecosystems. My education is environmental science and conservation biology, and I recommend that this zoning change be declined. You will see in the shadow studies that are in your handout that there is an extensive amount of shadow that would be cast by tall and wide buildings that are being proposed with a zoning change. Shadows of a 300-foot tower will extend well out across the lagoon. This has serious implications to the sensitive nearshore ecosystems and wildlife that inhabit the lagoon. Tall buildings also put residents that run, walk their dogs, and fish along the shoreline in constant afternoon shadow, and the neighborhoods behind the proposed towers in morning darkness. Regarding the rezoning, it does not comply with standards. There will certainly be adverse impacts to the natural environment, and we have to protect the lagoon, which provides critical habitat to many species protected by the Federal Endangered Species Act. The lagoon is home to 250 plus species of fish and 100 species plus of birds. The health of the lagoon also contributes to our economies, the economy of Palm Beach County, the economy of Palm Beach, and the city of West Palm Beach, and each of those entities invest in its health. Palm Beach County, government agencies, nonprofits, and donors are engaged in the restoration of the lagoon and the protection. Palm Beach County's 2021 Lake Worth Lagoon Management Plan, which you should all read, has been implemented to safeguard the lagoon from damages and to conserve it. $88 million has been spent to improve habitat allocated from the Florida legislature and also local and federal agencies. As noted, an allowance of 300-foot tall buildings will cast shadows for much of the day on the ecosystems and the wildlife who need sunlight to survive. That includes seagrass, which you know is in crisis right now. Seagrass is a plant like every other. First and foremost, it needs sunlight to survive. It is the basis of the ecosystem in the lagoon. It is home to many different species and provides its only food source for our manatee, which you know is also in crisis. We have to do whatever we can to sustain it. Juvenile fish use that seagrass habitat, as do many others. I can go on. According to Palm Beach County, on their seagrass fact sheet, seagrass is a fish factory because of the animals, and just like plants, it needs sunlight to grow.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. While the next speaker comes forward, if we could have Terrence, is it Luffy or Duffy? Duffy, come forward. Shakama Glover, I didn't know if you want to come forward. I just wanted me to read your comments. But if you'd like to speak, come forward. And Lupa Saras, if you come forward as well. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Joanna Elm, and I'm a Flagler Point resident. I've owned a condo at Flagler Point for the last 13 years. You've heard today from the presentations of the staff that Flagler Point is the only planned development that is part of the CMUD South expansion proposed area, and that's not because we want to be there. The Slade and Villa del Lago and Majestic Towers, according to the staff, didn't want to be there, so they're not part of that area now. We don't want to be there either. If you look at that little model there, not something that I built, but one of our committee, if you're looking at it from where you're sitting, the building on the right, 306 feet, is Temple Israel, which you approved maybe several months back. You approved the rezoning of Temple Israel, which was kind of in CMUD North or CMUD proper, whatever they're calling it, now seems to be in CMUD South. And then we're now talking about the building that is next to us, because we're the little white building there in the middle. And so that's what I call the 1701 North Flagler, or the related group, or the Ritz-Carlton project. So you can see how that looks. That looks dire enough. But now, when you approve that, and both Temple and Ritz-Carlton can start building, we are going to be sitting in the middle of a construction site for 2 to 4, maybe 5 or 6 years. Now, that's a pretty horrible situation, and we are actually the only parcel there on North Flagler Drive where the construction, we're not going to be separated by a street or a drive or a boulevard. We're not even separated by an alleyway. We have our entrance driveway to the building. We have a scrawny, low little hedge next to that, and then we have Temple. You come around, you've got the exit driveway, scrawny little hedge right next door with the 5-foot setbacks. That's a really untenable situation. You've got to also bear in mind that when construction starts, construction in West Palm Beach, you're allowed between 8 and 8 on weekends, 7 to 7 Monday through Friday. Can you imagine what that's going to be like for the residents of Flagler Point? Now, we have a number of people who work from home. We have...
I'm sorry, you have to conclude your remarks.
Really?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes,
Wow.
3 minutes, as we said. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Sir, do you wish to come forward? Have I called your name? Yes. Okay, come forward, please. Go ahead, please state your name.
Terrence Duffy, 1551 North Flagler Drive, the Slade. I'd like to speak in opposition of the extension of the CMUD South program. While I appreciate the expansion in the existing CMUD boundary, additional incentives for developers seem unnecessary at this point, as evidenced by the building lot that was purchased with some development rights down on South Flagler for $195 million. Seems to be incentive enough. Also concerned about the Me Too effect. As our Flagler Point residents have experienced, they probably supported the CMUD expansion originally, looking next door and saying, no one would ever build on a synagogue location. That thing will be here forever. And now they have experienced that Me Too, the synagogue has been put into CMUD, and now we've got 300 feet going up next door. So the CMUD expansion to the south puts us in the same situation that Flagler Point is in right now. Expanding south and the tendency to expand those development rights to adjacent parcels, I think, is a real risk. The existing height allowances in the CMUD South area along Flagler, along Dixie, allow for significant development and growth, as we've seen with Lofton, as we've seen with Tortoise One to the south. So at this time, I would, encourage the planning board to vote against and not recommend. I think the planning department has done a good job. Rick Green and his staff and Linda Louie did a good job. But as Linda Louie mentioned earlier in her presentation, she used the word sandwich for Flagler Point. And I think that's demonstrated very well in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I've called everyone's name. Please come forward. I've called everyone's name who has a card. Is there anyone, okay, we don't have you come forward. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard this evening whose name I have not yet called? Ma'am, are you one who wishes to speak? Please come forward. You can speak up behind her. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this evening? Well, could you, Mr. Seymour? Thank you. I've gotten 2 more. Tatiana, is that your name, ma'am?
Tatiana.
Tatiana? Beautiful first name. So you'll follow her, and then Brian Seymour. Is there forward? Yes. Have you filled out a card?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What was your name?
Linda.
Linda. Do you have a last name, Linda?
G-R-O-S-Z.
Okay. I called your name earlier. Please, that's fine.
I couldn't hear it.
That's no problem. Why don't you come over here, and you could speak before Mr. Seymour, okay? All right. Please go forward.
Evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Shakima Glover, and I'm here
I have to interrupt you. Your penmanship is exquisite. You have wrote a long comment, and I usually hate reading them because I struggle through. I said I never would read one this long, but it's just so well done. You have to give her full 3 minutes back. I just have to commend you. On all the years I've been here, absolutely exquisite.
Thank you. So I'm here tonight for North End Rise, and what North End Rise is a nonprofit that covers the North End, the 33407 zip codes of the North End, Pleasant City, and Coleman Park. And the related group has held several meetings with the surrounding communities and in the last few months. And some of these residents have attended these meetings. And some of the concerns and feedback I've heard from personal conversations from within the meetings and things that have been documented is that a lot of the North End area residents feel like the documented community concerns, if they are going to be addressed, that this project would be beneficial. And if it's not beneficial, whatever the benefits are or non-benefits, that should be clearly stated. It's also been noted by the Coleman Park residents that the Coleman Park is not in the CRA, and it will be beneficial if this project will allow the enhancement of Coleman Park, whose boundaries are from Palm Beach Lakes to 25th, from Railroad Track Windsor Avenue to Railroad Track on Division Avenue. So the premise behind that is the fact that this, as you can see, is a big development, and a lot of traffic will be coming through these underserved communities, which are already distressed. So if some of that funding can come to build up the infrastructure in those communities which are already underserved, then the benefit will be seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, if you were to go forward, we'll go back and forth. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. My name is Linda Groves. I'm a resident at 429 47th Street in the Northwood Harbor area. I came here to learn more about all of the waivers that are being considered this evening. And, you know, there's a lot of food for thought. So I would just like to ask for some clarity regarding CMUD. There was a number that had changed or something when they made this adaptation, but nobody's ever talked about what is the differential. So there's this new cap, but what was the number before? So what are we gaining, is my question.
We're not here to answer your questions. Go ahead and
You can't
testify, but there'll be a staff person who's
Oh,
taking
good.
notes,
I
and they'll
just
come
wanted
forward.
to know about that. I
I
wanted
understand.
some.
This is your opportunity to give testimony,
Well, I
not
wanted
to ask
some
questions.
Well, I wanted some clarity, just
That's
to
okay. You ask the
understand.
questions, and the staff person will respond when it's her turn
Okay,
to speak.
so I just have a question about the project. There's
Okay.
a second question as well. So
Go ahead,
I
ask the question, and then when everyone's done talking, she'll get up and she'll take notes of the
Great.
questions that were asked, and she'll respond to them.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone here for their thoughtful questions. We all appreciate them very much. Thank you very much for that. And the second question that I had was, was on this, I forgot. What was the second question? I guess I forgot. I'm sorry. It was
The
about.
weather tomorrow is,
I'm sorry?
the weather tomorrow is
No,
sunny.
no.
No.
I'll tell you what,
No.
though. Why don't you sit down? I'll let you come back up if you think of your second question. You could also ask.
I wrote, it's on my phone, but my phone's
Okay.
over there.
Go ahead and pull it up. But you can ask Ms. Louie. You can sit down and ask your question, and she'll come forward and
I
she'll answer
remember
your
what it
question.
was.
Okay, go
It
ahead.
was about, when the presentation started, we were talking about all the people who weighed in, and we're weighing in about their pros and cons, and the attorney was talking about the letters that were written, and then she mentioned that there were a lot of people who opted out. And that didn't quite make sense to me, because this is a very important project, and everybody's very concerned about growth and about what's being built in their neighborhood. So I'd like a little bit more light shed on that, and I'm stating these things for the record, because I think there needs to be some clarification. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Okay. please go
Tatiana
ahead.
at 4911 North Flagler Drive. I'm looking at this beautiful black and white over here. My apartment building would be white, and what they want to build across the street from me is exactly that. And I ask that you consider the residents that have been here for a long time, that have watched all the development go on, that these 300-plus feet projects that they're asking for waivers for and asking you to change the zoning for, we've been here for 20-plus years, and that's what it's going to look like. They don't fit into our neighborhoods. They don't fit into what our properties look like now, and they're going to give shadows and totally destroy our lagoons and our wildlife. And I really wish you would consider not expanding the CMUD and having West Palm Beach residents live like this. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Brian Seymour with Gunster on behalf of 1717 North Flagler Drive Venture, which, as you all probably know, is part of the related group. Andrew Chesnick from the Related Group wanted to be here tonight. He was planning to come up. He had a family emergency. He did want to apologize for not being able to be here. I don't know if that's just because he sent me to talk, but he did want me to let you know. There was some discussion. This came from a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings, commission workshop, direction from the commission to move forward. We appreciate all the work that staff has done on this, including a lot of discussions, meetings with the community, and again, that commission workshop. We have also, because obviously we're impacted by this, we wanted to go out to the community as well and say, what do y'all think? And we went pretty broad on that, including the folks in Pleasant City and who you heard who may be impacted by some of the traffic, and there will be pedestrian connectivity and other things that go with that. So this year we had 3 meetings, community meetings that were broadly scoped, March 20th, April 27th, and June 1st. And those were large. And then we also had a meeting on September 14th where we noticed just the residents of Flagler Point. Everybody who lives in Flagler Point got a letter from us and said, if you'd like to come and talk to us, we could do that. That's after 8 meetings that we had in 2022. To try to just gather input. What is it that are critical issues? Vast majority of that the staff got as well, and those items are included, right? We have to look at Flagler, we have to look at some of the issues that come up with there. We talked about drainage, we talked about roadway improvements, all that's in there. We have proposed a couple of additional items. We haven't worked through that, so I don't want to spend the time on that tonight. It's something we are, just so y'all know, we're going to continue to have discussions with staff to see if there are additional incentives that we can put together and come together on if possible. There were some legal questions that came up. Nothing makes me happier. But I then talked to Ms. Rothenberg about it, and we're going to have some further discussion on that, and we will work through that before the City Commission. Look, this is a progress, right? The city has a vision for itself. At some point, everything on Flagler was, 1, 2, 3, 4, or no stories. In fact, at some point, all of what we're talking about was water, and it got filled in the 1950s under the Butler Act. And so things do change, and we understand that there's concerns about that, and as we get into design, we will talk with that, and we will continue to reach out with folks on that. But tonight, what we're asking for is to move forward with that expansion. We believe that this is consistent with the vision that the City Commission has for this city going forward, and we do ask that this receive a recommendation of approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
First time I've been under 3 minutes of my life.
I can commend you. Maybe the first of many times. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard whose name I have not yet called? And if not, we'll bring it back to the board. And Ms. Louie, I will invite you to come forward, and if there's anything you'd like to add, as well address that lady's questions.
Okay, so I picked up a couple of concerns. One was regarding the property values affected negatively by the proposed rezoning. The text amendment does support mixed-use infill redevelopment, and the CMUD regulations encourages redevelopment, which is likely to increase property values when the redevelopment does happen. So there is no evidence that it does decrease property values. Regarding the clarity to the development cap, when the Curry Mixed Use District was established, the development cap was also created at that point in time, and that number is based on a level of service analysis to ensure that there is sufficient public facilities capacities to accommodate those development caps. So it's not going to change. It's been adopted after an extensive level of service analysis. So it's not changing.
She also had the question, I know you explained it earlier, maybe she didn't hear it, or maybe we didn't understand it correctly, but when you would explain that some had opted out to be part of this, can you explain that?
Well, as I had mentioned that, there were preliminary public workshops, and a lot of residents came out. The original preliminary, let me just pull up that slide. So the preliminary boundaries that was established was this area here. As you can see, the area encompassed more of the properties along Flagler Drive, and there were a lot more planned developments in this area, and such as the Slade, Flagler Point's in there as well. You know, not everyone's going to be happy. I mean, these are condo owners. You know, there's not really a unified position on this. So it's, like I said, the complexities of a condo ownership does create some complexities with trying to come to a unified or consensus in terms of agreeing on whether or not, like, we should include or to exclude. Based on the amount of concerns that we've received in these preliminary feedback, it just made sense to staff to exclude them from the expansion area.
Thank you. I think Mr.
If I can, let me try to further clarify.
Yeah.
When we first started looking at the expansion of CMUD South, we defined a study area that would include the area where CMUD ended at the south end, which is the north boundary of Flagler Point, and then we were going to take it all the way down to Good Samaritan Hospital. So we were looking at basically a rectangle. It wasn't really, maybe opting out is not the correct word. It was an initial study area that we looked at. Once we delved into our analysis, we identified that there were approximately 5 or 6 planned developments. Some were professional office residential plan development, others were residential plan developments. And then when we started mapping that out, we recognized that there was a trend that most of those planned developments were along Flagler Drive. Most of those PDs were approved in the late 90s, early 2000s. So a planned development, as this board is well aware, because you deal with them so often, it's a specific approval for a particular project. So it didn't make sense to include a zoning district that would, in essence, it wouldn't usurp the planned development, because even our zoning map today has planned development scattered throughout the city. So we refined the shape of the area from the initial study area, which is basically taking the whole corridor down to Good Samaritan Hospital. And then we recognized with all the PDs along Flagler Drive, we meandered the boundary to exclude those. Flagler Point, we left inside the boundary to provide that connection between CMUD to the north and the CMUD South expansion. But the PD would still continue to govern the development or redevelopment of that property. So hope that clarifies.
That's helpful. Thank you. All right, we now bring it back to the board, and I'm going to call on everyone eventually, but would anyone like to begin first, just people's reaction to what you've heard or preliminary thoughts? Go ahead, Patrick.
And maybe it's just part
If
of
you
our
could speak directly to the microphone.
part of
Thank
our
you, sir.
discussion up here, but and confirm if I'm wrong in saying this, but any subsequent proposals, if these changes move forward, any subsequent proposals for specific projects would have to return to this board for review and approval. That's correct.
You want to address that? That's my understanding. They're all shaking their head as well.
Right. So, and when you set a zoning height maximum, setback to setback, yes, that's one possible iteration of a future project. But in reality, there's 100 different ways that a project could be designed on a site that responds very sensitively to your neighbors. And that's something that we would judge at a subsequent hearing.
Thank you. Would you like to, anyone else like to go next? And if not, I'll just go down the thing. Jean, since you volunteered, I'll jump on you.
I think Patrick made a pretty good point. If these projects are included in CMUD, they would subsequently come before the Planning and Zoning Board, and they would have to show that there's some sort of consistency, and they would have to present their plans in full, and we would just take it on a step-by-step basis. I think the outcry from Flagler Point should be taken into consideration from the standpoint that residents are concerned, and with any construction project there will be a little bit of inconvenience, a lot of inconvenience. It could be, as someone mentioned, a couple years, it could be more, but I think it is also important to keep in mind that what's being presented is consistent with the city commission and the city's view for the development of the area. So it's a lot to take in, but I think in totality, we have to also think a little bit progressively and be open to change somewhat.
Thank you. Will?
Yeah, but just echoing Patrick and Jean, it's a delicate balance when we talk about projects like this and what the future looks like. Everybody has rights on the waterfront. If you're the purchaser of a property, you have a right to develop it to what the law allows. The city has a vision for what wants to be accomplished up there. The redesign of Curry Park is going to be beautiful and magnificent. It's going to, definitely change the north area that we've been waiting for years and years and years. There's some give and take there. Anytime that we can get the developers to pay for improvements to our community in terms of the roadways and other things that they need to do in terms of contributions to work with the city and to help the city achieve its vision and the residents achieve their vision, I think that's the fair balance that we're trying to find. So,
thank you. Peter?
I feel for the residents of Flagler Point. The move in the city of West Palm Beach for growth is like this big heavy machinery that it is very difficult to stop. When your building was built, you enjoyed approximately 20 years, beautiful views to the north and the south. And the single-family residence to your south was very upset when you built the building. And times change, pressure for development changes. I'm not convinced that the values of your units are going to decrease because of construction. You have location, location, location. That's the motto for real estate. And I think that after the construction is finished, you will see that your property values will increase. It's a changing vision for the city, and the pressure for growth is there. West Palm Beach hasn't made land in a long time, so they got to look at all the undeveloped areas. They have to encourage development, and encouraging development on locations that are very positive, very favorable, water views are of primary importance. It is unfortunate that you're going to be overshadowed. Even now, without any additional incentives, the building that we approved last month will be higher, no matter what. And they can go even higher, but really the difference between, an extra 200 feet, you're not going to see any difference in terms of the residents. For that matter, I think that I would support the city's approach to rezoning of the sites.
Deborah?
As I listened to the Flagler Point residents talk and compared that with the tremendous report and research that staff did, and looking at the model that's presented, I've seen that. I live in the area, and I can't tell you that my heart doesn't go out to you. Being there for so many years, and you have the privilege of living on the waterfront on Flagler. That's a prime area, and I think whatever is built there, you will still have that advantage. But I did take into account the testimony of those who talked about the shadow studies, the upheaval that construction causes, the immense construction traffic as well. And it seems like you are being sandwiched in, but as I listened to Ms. Louie too, she did talk about the being in compliance with the Florida statutes, the caps that will be maintained, that can't be changed. And whatever happens, I don't really believe that the property values will change. If anything, it will go up just because of location. But it seems like with our building improvement, everything is going up. The stories do get higher. And I don't know if there's any more chance or any more plans for further talks. If there are additional talks where there can be more incentives to the residents of Flagler Point. But I have to commend staff for a tremendous report, and that's it.
All right, thank you. I'd like to add my own thoughts, and there's no one on this board who isn't sympathetic to some of the issues Flagler Point is dealing with. I live 4 blocks from this expansion. I lived there for 33 years. I also have a view of the water. And I will say I was around when Flagler Point was built, and I was well aware there were some really strong objections from some of your neighbors who said, how dare the city could allow this monstrosity to be built that absolutely dwarf the adjoining properties. But West Palm Beach has been expanding and growing, and either you grow out or you grow up. That's the only choice. You have the sprawl or you have the more intensive development. Now, my next door neighbor had a 1-story building. He added a 2nd story. Absolute right. Lovely neighbor, by the way. My water view was cut in half when he did that. The truth is, my property value went up, even though my personal enjoyment went down. Because there's no single thing you can do to improve your property value, nothing more than have big investments right next door. What are going to be the price points of these buildings? They're going to have a profound impact on the value of your units. Now, some of the legitimate complaints you have during construction, but a lot of that would happen anyway if we didn't have these caps, because they would still be construction. There'll still be shadows. Not as much, but some of this stuff you'd be dealing with anyway. So I believe, I was just trying to do a rough calculation, I believe the city's population may have increased, I think we're at 120 or something now. Were we in the 80s or 90s at the time this building was built? Our city has grown by 50% since your building was built, okay? So there are changing times. As one speaker said, and it always has stayed with me, one of you people in public thing, said, you have to remember, Mr. Mans, you're the planning board of the city of West Palm Beach, not the planning board of a single condominium. And when we balance the overwhelming needs of the city, when we look at an area of the city that has not enjoyed the growth, the investment that so many other parts of the city, when we see what can happen, we see the greater good, we have an obligation. I still think if it's a consolation, this happened with the Bristol. What was the Trianon? The people next door were concerned, would it have an impact? I think it's been shown that it had a profound positive impact on their property values, even if they don't like the building next door. I hope that happens at least for you. One last thing, and it's been mentioned by a couple of my current board members, forgive me, but a really important point. The building itself is not in front of us. There's still a lot of things that can be done that would mitigate the impact on your property. I encourage you to enter into engaged negotiations with them, because they'll have their incentive to get your support, if possible, at least to mitigate your opposition. So there's still an opportunity to impact this, but in the long run, this will be good for the city, and believe it or not, it's going to be good for your property as well. So if there's no other further discussion, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval of planning board case 1973, a city-initiated request for a small-scale future land use map amendment to change plus or minus 17.3 acres, generally bounded by the parcel south of Pine Street to the north, 14th Street to the south, North Flagler Drive to the east, and North Dixie Highway to the west, from multifamily and commercial future land use designation into a mixed-use future land use designation. This motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes a finding of fact that the application complies with the required standards of policy 1.1.5 of the City of West Palm Beach Comprehensive Plan.
We have a motion. Have we a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Part two is I'll move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval of planning board case number 1973A, a city-initiated request for a zoning map amendment to rezone certain properties generally located south of Pine Street to the north, 14th Street to the south, North Flagler Drive to the east, and North Dixie Highway to the west, from professional office, residential, and general commercial into Curry Mixed Use District Core 1 Sub-District and Curry Mixed Use District Transition Sub-District. The motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application complies with the required standards of section 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations.
We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. One more
I'm
motion.
looking for the text
Oh, is this?
way down somewhere. Oh, I just had it here.
You need the code revision case as well to
Okay.
be voted upon.
Yeah, we're looking for the,
Yeah. I move, is it 2306?
2306.
And you'll also have to make reference to the revised language for the Northwood Road extension as well, when you make a motion.
okay, well, but it makes, stand by, we may need your assistance. Why don't you go ahead and make the motion?
Okay,
and
I
we'll see
move
if
that the
there's-
planning board recommend to the city commission approval of code revision case number 23-06, a city-initiated request for a text amendment to the zoning and land development regulations, chapter 94, article 7, special district, section 94-215, Curry Mixed Use District, to address the proposed Curry Mixed Use District 7 expansion and to provide for additional height bonus incentives. The
And-
motion,
I think there's, I think some other additional part on the language.
Yes, there has been some revised language for the Northwood Road extension incentive, which I have on the,
this one?
I think
yes,
it's on the
it
screen.
highlighted in
Is
green.
it right there
Which is the revised text.
on your screen?
Okay, I have one paragraph on this one. Do you want me
Go
to
ahead.
add-
I'm sorry?
you want me to finish it or add this one before?
Well, as the amended, with the amended text as presented
Okay.
by staff.
Okay, I'll go back, with the amended text provided by the staff. The motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application complies with the required standards, section 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations.
All right, thank you. We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Let's see. That then brings us to, is it 1967 and 1967?
1967 and 67A.
Right?
That's why you're an arbitrator.
Okay. May we hear from the applicant? Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, board members, for being here tonight. My name is Matt Wojciechowski. I am with Schmid Nichols here on behalf of the applicant, 15514 Forum Place, LLC. We are here tonight with our team, myself, some of the ownership group, as well as our traffic engineer, if there's any questions that come up. We have a two-part application that we are presenting to you tonight. Request number one, case number 1967, is a small-scale future land use map amendment from commercial to multifamily. And case number 1967A is a rezoning from that same parcel from office commercial to multifamily high-density residential for a rezoning. So our subject site is located at 15514 Forum Place. That's generally located north of Palm Beach Lakes, east of I-95, highlighted in red on the screen. So that's east of the outlet mall as well. And that's at the very end of Forum Place, abutting the canal that connects Lake Mangonia to Clear Lake. So zooming in just a little bit for context, the site is now on the upper right of your screen. So you can just kind of see its relationship to Forum Place, Palm Beach Lakes, and Congress, and that general intersection. And then zooming in just a little bit more, you can see we're at the east end of Forum Place. We're bounded by the alley, public right-of-way to the north, the canal to the east, professional office to the south and west as well. So our first proposal tonight is to change the future land use designation from commercial to the multifamily. That would match the future land use designation of the properties to the north of the alley and north of the site. So getting into the standards for code compliance for the future land use amendment, we are required to meet one of the five. The one that we are focused on is the changed assumptions regarding the availability of affordable housing. So as we all know, the supply of workforce or affordable housing in the city and the state is very low. The demand for workforce housing and affordable housing is very high. It's been steadily increasing, and development has not been able to catch up. In tandem with that, the supply of office, particularly professional office in the city, has changed, as there's nearly 2 million square feet of new office space, both planned and entitled, in the downtown area. So that takes some of the burden off of the other areas of the city to provide for that professional office. So continuing that trend of changed assumptions, available land for this workforce housing, particularly near employment centers, is very scarce. So the parcel that we're focusing on today is underutilized. It has a one-story office building that was built in 1980. So this is an inefficient use of that land in this area as you look at some of the buildings that are surrounding it, as well as unrealized tax benefits for the city by not capturing the highest and best use on that property. And this is all summed up, this changed assumptions, in the housing affordability that was recognized by the City Commission Resolution number 306-22, which was adopted in December of 2022. The Planning Department was directed by the City Commission to draft workforce housing provisions that would increase the supply of affordable and workforce housing per the Florida state statutes. So this future land use and rezoning does have an accompanying site plan. I'll give you a little bit of the sort of overview on that at the end of this presentation, but although it's not being considered tonight, I just feel it's fair to give you some context as to what we're planning for. So continuing on with our request, we are proposing, as I mentioned, a rezoning of the site from office commercial to multifamily 32. Again, that matches that zoning designation to the north of the alley that abuts our property. So I'll just going to highlight that we do meet all of the rezoning standards in section 9432A. So this is consistent with the elements of the city's comprehensive plan. By amending the future land use, the rezoning would then match the future land use designation. There are changed conditions within the city since this property was built. Primarily the need for workforce housing, which I just mentioned. So that creates a demand, particularly for this type of multifamily residential. The proposed amendment is in conformance with all portions of the city's development code, so we meet that one. The proposed amendment will be consistent with the future land uses. That's why we're going through this process. So we'd like to amend it to multifamily so we can rezone it to multifamily to build multifamily. The Facilities for this site have been confirmed by city staff, engineering staff. You heard a little bit about that in the last presentation, so that has all been confirmed, that we do have the necessary infrastructure to support this project. The proposed amendment would not result in any significant adverse impacts. This is a developed site. It's mostly pervious surface right now, or impervious surface rather, with parking and building. So we will be enhancing the landscaping, the buffers, so we will not have any negative impact to that, as well as we'll be upgrading the infrastructure on the site, which is over 40 years old. The proposed amendment would not adversely affect property values in the area. This was again discussed in your last case. We're proposing to build a new facility that would bring a new investment to this area. The comprehensive plan does encourage this type of housing near employment centers, which allows for the reduction of traffic, trips to work, and reduces cost for those living in those areas to be able to get to their jobs. And then whether this results in an orderly and logical development pattern. So we have not identified any negative effects that this would have. It's a logical and orderly development pattern. It's common practice to locate professional office and multifamily residential near one another. And this is, I guess, best evidenced by, the city does have zoning districts that are professional office residential, just further highlighting the compatibility of those two uses. So just a little bit about this as well, having those workforce centers very near, or those multifamily workforce housing near the workforce centers. Our subject site here is kind of on the upper half of that map in that rectangle. This is the city's future bicycle network. So just kind of zooming in on our site a little bit into that red rectangle, you can see we're located kind of at the intersection of two proposed bicycle infrastructure elements. So we're proposing to install the shared use pathway east of our property, outside of the property line, which would then allow for, there'd only be one more gap then to connect this to Palm Beach Lakes. And there's also an east-west connector along the alley that would allow for bicycle infrastructure to get to the outlet malls and then to Congress and then further. So this blue area I've highlighted here on the next slide represents the city's mobility plan for the downtown area. And as you can see, our subject site is at the upper left-hand corner, so in the northwest portion of this map. And we would have multiple ways to connect into this bicycle infrastructure, which would then further provide non-motorized connectivity to downtown and really just play well into that workforce housing that we are proposing. So as promised, I want to give you a few highlights of the site plan. Again, not being considered tonight, but this is the plan that we will be proposing to City Commission once this moves forward. It would be 238 units, mix of studios, ones and twos, primarily studios and one bedrooms, would make up about 60% of the project, and then another 40% would be two bedrooms. 383 parking spaces in a 4-story parking garage, landscape buffer along the property line. It would be an 8-story, 85-foot building. The proposed zoning that we are going to, utilizing the city's resolution, would allow us to go up to 105 feet. We've capped that at 85 to try to limit the intensity of this development and preserve any views for our neighbors to the west. We've also arranged our amenities to the east to try to be as least intrusive as possible. That area will be secured and gated. As I mentioned, along the east side of the property, there would be the pathway, that extension. The turquoise necklace is what it's referred to along the southern portion around Clear Lake. So this would serve as an extension of that and connect into the bicycle master plan. We are providing workforce housing units. 25% of our 238, so 60 units, would be available at 120% AMI, and that's targeting those key workforce groups: teachers, nurses, firefighters, law enforcement, and those types of workers. So this isn't, those are the type of workforce community members that we're hoping to attract here. A quick view, rendering of the project at the end of Forum Place. As you can see, the canal there to the east, and then our neighbors to the west at 1601 Forum Place. Landscape plan, not much to mention there, just in case there was discussion. So just to kind of sum things up, we are utilizing the city's ordinance that they enacted to provide more workforce housing in the city. By allowing us to increase our density, it also provides the city with more workforce housing units. So that would be a benefit. It's a logical redevelopment of an underutilized parcel to bring the highest and best use to the property. The building was designed to minimize off-site impacts, as I described about the massing of the building, the way it was designed, providing infrastructure upgrades, which would help with the whole area, drainage and the like, providing the off-site pedestrian pathway, burying the power lines underground to further preserve views, and based on staff's professional opinion, we have received a recommendation of support. So I would request that this presentation and the testimony tonight be entered into the record, and would respectfully ask for your support in the subject future land use map amendment and rezoning request.
Okay, fine. Any questions of the applicant? Deborah, let me start with you. Peter?
It's a wonderful project. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Is that a question?
Question.
Well,
agreed.
Just to clarify, we're only voting on zoning tonight? You just showed the project?
Yeah, future land use and zoning, but I just wanted to, just in case, just full disclosure, that's what we're moving forward with to City Commission.
Gene?
No questions.
Patrick?
I had one question, so just to clarify, with the zoning change, there's no anticipated increase and intensification of the site based on what it is basically very similar.
It's very comparable. So obviously the one-story building, the proposed 8-story building would be more intense in that regard. There was minimal impacts on drainage, stormwater, and those types of infrastructure needs. And by changing to this zoning designation, we actually limit our potential traffic trips to about 4,000 less than what would be permitted by a full office development on this parcel. So it's actually, in some regards, it's a downgrade in intensity to the site.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We received an email from the property manager for 1601 Forum Place, Centurion Tower. Not a fan of this project. Have you had a chance to speak with them?
We did. We reached out to all the neighbors. I walked to every property back in August. Everybody's communication and phone numbers, emails I was able to get. I've been providing them with updates along the way. We did meet with ownership and their representatives, I believe it was about a month and a half ago, to let them know this was going to be coming to the board. You're going to see some you're going to get some mailers, see some signs out there. So we did took into account what we could with their concerns, but they've obviously voiced them as well. So
okay, fair enough. All right. Any other questions of the applicant? And if not, can we hear from staff?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anne Clarice Gaisha Volsi, preferably Gaisha, for the record. Today I'll be presenting Planning Board case number 1967, which is a future land use map amendment. Planning Board case number 1967A for the rezoning. And before I get started, just wanted to make sure that you guys have the resolution number 306-22, just in case you guys want to take a look over it. Okay, perfect. All right. So the location, it's 1551 Forum Place. It's one parcel, size 3.74 acres. The current zoning designation is OC, office commercial. Future land use is commercial. The existing use is an office building. So the applicant has submitted a future land use map amendment, a rezoning, and a special review, which includes workforce housing under resolution 306-22. So resolution number 306-22 provides interim standards for the city commission to review workforce housing residential projects as permitted by section 166.04151 of the Florida statutes. So this redevelopment project and waivers will be reviewed by the city commission. So for the future land use map amendment, case number PB 1967, the analysis is that the change from commercial to multifamily will increase the development potential within the subject area from 0.75 floor area ratio to 32 dwelling units per acre, and per the resolution, it will double to 64 dwelling units per acre. So the existing future land use is commercial with 0.75, and the maximum development potential is 122,185.80 square feet, and proposed is multifamily to 32 dwelling units per acre, or 64 with the resolution 306-22, which would max out to 239 dwelling units. So the proposed future land use would be logical since the established pattern includes residential in the northern and eastern parcels. So based on the LOS analysis, the level of service analysis that was done, drainage, potable water, wastewater, traffic, solid waste, and schools, all of those have been met. And so that means all of the utility facilities will provide adequate, will have adequate capacity to maintain this proposal. And here I have the existing future land use designation, just a visual to see it going from commercial to MF, multifamily. So next is the rezoning, planning board case number 1967A. The analysis is to rezone from office commercial to multifamily high density MF32, and MF32 would allow for multifamily residential. And here is a visual where it changes from the existing zoning of office commercial to MF32 multifamily high density. And the summary of findings: the proposed MF32 zoning designation is consistent with the proposed future land use of multifamily. It is compatible and similar with the land use and zoning pattern of the area, and it meets the rezoning standards of section 94-32 of the zoning and land development regulations. And all public notices requirements have been met. The signs have been posted, the mailers have been done, and the ads have been published. And here I have the pictures of that. And the recommendation from staff is that the planning board case number 1967, the future land use map amendment, we're recommending approval as it complies with chapter 163 of Florida statutes. It complies with the comprehensive plan, policy 1.15, and change assumptions, regarding the availability of workforce housing. And the planning board case number 1967A, for the rezoning, we're recommending approval as it complies with section 94-32A of the zoning and land development regulations. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of staff? Let me start this side. Deborah? Peter?
None.
Jean? I had a question. If we approve this, I mean, the main appeal, I think, to the board is the workforce housing element. Are we protected in this? Because if we change it to multifamily, how do we know that it will be used for workforce housing? How can we protect it, if not now, but in the future as well? Do you understand my question? Maybe it's within this. I just want to be sure we're protected.
I believe a portion of that is included in the resolution 306 -22. On the last page, it talks about what they would be approved for.
So they're proof of that, so that can't change without it coming before us? So if they sold it later, for example?
No, it wouldn't change.
Okay.
It's
I just want to make
locked
sure,
in
but you
for-
understand my question, Rick?
I do.
Yeah.
Let me clarify. Resolution 306, well, let me back up to provide some context. We recognized roughly 4 years ago that workforce housing is a priority for the city. So we started working on elements of that a long time ago. You may remember, but the first step we took is we adopted a downtown workforce housing incentive. Unfortunately, most of those projects go to our downtown action committee. But what that incentive did was give a developer additional height. And what we said is if we give you additional height and additional floor area ratio, you had to set aside 20% of that increase.
Sure.
And we've had a couple developers take advantage of that. We then looked citywide, and what can we do to benefit and create more workforce housing citywide? So we adopted the resolution that Gaisha talked about, Resolution 30622, and the applicant mentioned, in December of 2022. What that incentive does is allow you to double your density. So if this applicant chooses not to move forward with workforce housing, they would be limited to 32 units an
I
acre.
see, that's what you're
If
saying.
they
Okay, thank
take
you.
advantage of the resolution, they could go to 64.
Just so we're protected, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure,
And-
that's all.
And just to give you the full story now, and then you may be familiar with Senate Bill 102, which is commonly referred to as the Live Local Act. That went into effect on July 1st. The restrictions in the Live Local Act are more stringent than Resolution 30622, and we have yet to have an applicant take advantage of that. That bill went into effect July 1st. It's restricted to mixed-use districts, and again, heights are controlled. And a lot of developers were contacting our staff and said, well, what happens to Resolution 30622? And in essence, we said that would be, in essence, sunset on July 1st when the Live Local Act goes into effect. So we told developers, if you get an application in before July 1st, I'm sorry, then you could utilize the resolution. We had 6 applications come in within a day or two of that date, this being one of the 6. As you may remember, when Alex Hansen presented the evaluation and appraisal report update, which got approved by the commission at our last meeting on first reading, transmitted to the state today, we're going to go back to the resolution that is now, for lack of a better term, no longer in effect. And as part of the comprehensive plan changes, after they get adopted, we're going to come back with a similar code change that's going to take us back to what we had in 30622. So you'll be seeing that in the future. So
So ultimately, we may get it back, is that what you're saying, or will that
we're
stay
going to
law?
get language that we're going to place as part of our zoning code, similar to what we had in place in 30622.
Okay.
That basically would allow tantamount to a doubling of density if and only if you provide a minimum of 25% work.
Thank you for that
Hopefully
clarification, thank you as well. Okay, any other questions of staff? Go ahead.
So as you further explain, the penalty for the developer who doesn't follow the workforce guidelines is a reduction in the units they can develop. Is there any financial penalty?
Well, the idea would be is that they
That
could
they
not.
can't build what they want to
can't
build.
build what they want to build
So
unless
even
that
though it's
commitment.
diminished, it's smaller. It used to be, I thought that.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
No secrets here.
Well, let me see, yeah, and the sunshine law or something? No, that's the board, never mind, go ahead. You guys get to confer. Go ahead. Okay, did you, is your question answered?
Yes.
Is there any?
No, there is.
Okay, there are financial penalties if they were to try to get out of it.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, we have a couple, I think, on the public. I have Michael Friedman. Are you here, sir? Please come forward if you are. And then, let's see, there's Tracy Porto. Why don't you proceed, sir? State your name for the record.
My name is Michael Friedman, and I am an owner's representative here. And we kind of just want to voice our main concern, which I know we already sent you, but just on the scale and use of this project. Traditionally, obviously, this is an office area, and to have this mix in the park, call it, we just have some concerns about traffic, safety in the area, and just general concerns that our tenants have voiced to us. So we're just here kind of to object to that scale and use.
Okay.
And then she will
I
speak further.
appreciate your comments. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Tracy Porto. I'm the property manager.
Oh, that's right, we received your email.
The property manager for Centurion Tower.
Ma'am,
and
if
we
you could
also
kindly
are-
speak into the microphone, that's all.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Property manager for Centurion Tower, which is at 16014 Forum Place, and also we are a tenant of the property. This is a business district comprised of commercial buildings, not residential. And even though there are properties to the north and east of us, that are residential, those properties are part of a larger residential community that are accessed by residential roads with the sort of design and amenities that you would associate with a residential community. So the high-density multifamily project within a business district just wouldn't be a good fit for the roads and would be detrimental to the economy of the city. So the rest, you've already got that as part of your record, so I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Was there anyone else from the public who wished to be heard on this application? And if not, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Any thoughts you want to share?
I mean, the only question that I have is, could theoretically all of the other office parcels in there apply for this same zoning change?
No.
And why not look at this area like we looked at CMUD in the sense of broadening that scope instead of doing it on a one parcel basis?
Well, this was initiated by a private applicant. So, but to answer your question, any other parcel for commercial could come in and request to build residential. And that's actually on the last page of the reso. It pretty much says how many they can have and the percentage of workforce housing that they would have to provide.
And well, this was under a ordinance that is pretty much being sunset because of new state law. So that was an application made. I think there are 5 others too that we'll see, but
correct.
Someone has to do it. Okay, any general comments, concerns about this? We heard some concerns about it being in a business district, although I would note that some of those businesses have secretaries and other support staff that arguably could benefit by having housing nearby that's affordable. But does anyone have any concerns about this? If so, let's discuss it. We've always said workforce housing was an absolute priority for the city, and this is a project that's going to deliver some. And we've been very supportive of that generally. Are there concerns about this specific project, however, that we should be discussing?
Yeah, I think it's important that, you know, we again separate the specifics of the project from the request that's before us. And I think the capacity for this to be workforce housing via the change is a positive change. The specifics of access and traffic relative to the proposed subsequent application is something that should be addressed separately.
So for Ms. Porter and others here, the project itself will still be coming for us. This is just, do they have the right to proceed? And that's the question. That's your point, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So
Other
under Resolution 306-22, it'll go straight to City Commission. So right now it's just the rezoning and future land use that is before you.
Okay, thank you. And that's Patrick's point as well. Is there any concerns then with regard to this specific application? And if not, I'll look for a motion.
The actual wordage was omitted from our documents. I have the only version on paper.
So I think we'll let Peter
I have to
proceed.
read it. I move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval for a 2-part request by Matt Wojcicki of Smith Nichols on behalf of 1551 Forum Place LLC for the following to allow the development of a workforce housing project. Item 1, planning board case number 1967, a small-scale future land use map amendment to change the FLU designation of property consisting of approximately 3.74 acres located at 1551 Forum Place from commercial to multifamily. Item number 2, planning board case number 1967A, a rezoning to change the zoning designation of property consisting of approximately 3.74 acres and located at 1551 Forum Place from office commercial to multi-high density residential district. The motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes finding of fact that the application complies with the required standards of policy 1.1.5 of the City of West Palm Beach Comprehensive Plan and sections 94-32A of the City of West Palm Beach Zoning and Land Development Regulations. In addition, this recommendation is made subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report, dated November 21st, 2023. I move that these conditions are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the zoning and land development regulations and consistency with the comprehensive plan of the City of West Palm Beach.
We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We have the second one now? Is that, did you do 1967, 1967A, or are we done? Okay, good, good. All right, we now move just 3 more cases.
Breakfast will be served.
Planning Board case number 1937.
Cameron Ennis with Schmidt-Nichols for the record on behalf of the applicant. Thank you, board, and I'll try to make it quick. I know we're getting hungry for turkey here. So we have before you a plan development rezoning application, PB 1937. Just to jump right into it, the site is located on the east side of North Florida Mango Road, just north of Belvedere Road, and it is 2.6 acres in size. This is the future land use map. It currently has a commercial future land use designation, and we are proposing that to remain. And here's the zoning map. It has a general commercial zoning designation. It's surrounded by commercial and industrial properties. I'd also like to point out it's on the border of the municipal boundary. And we're proposing to rezone the site to a commercial plan development. Just an overview of tonight's request. Again, we're rezoning from general commercial to commercial plan development, and we have 1 waiver before you tonight to reduce the minimum lot size requirements by 2.4 acres. Looking at the existing site, you may know the site as Verdes Tropicana Lanes. It closed in 2021, has been abandoned ever since, and the applicant initially had plans to reuse the building as a self-storage facility. However, the FEMA flood elevation forced them to have to raise the floor by 18 inches. So they ended up having to abandon those plans, and it made more sense to go forward with a total redevelopment of the site. As you can imagine, the site was built in 1950, so there's some nonconformities that don't meet current code standards. So for one thing, it has 100% impervious area, as you can see in this view here. Almost everything on this site is either parking or building, which doesn't help with the drainage, stormwater drainage requirements. You can see from street view here from Florida Mango Road that there's minimal landscaping and screening. And finally, there are 2 existing driveways that are not built to current standards and that are not up to the safety standards of today's code. And the applicant is proposing to revise these driveways, as you'll see. So getting into the details of the site and landscape plan, the proposed building is 108,292 square foot, 2-story self-storage building broken up into 2 phases. The total redevelopment value is estimated about $17 million. Here you can see the total site with phase 2 included. Some of the benefits of redeveloping the site is you get about 22,651 square feet of new landscape pervious area. That's about 20% of the site. There will be a new 15-foot wide landscape buffer with screening along Florida Mango Road. Also 5-foot wide landscape buffers along the north, east, and south property lines. There's also additional green space provided along the north property line, which helps with some of the drainage requirements and also meeting that 20% landscape area requirement. Parking, if you remember back to June of this year, this board and then City Commission following that approved a zoning text change to reduce the parking requirements for self-storage uses to the following: 1 space per 200 storage bays with a minimum of 5 spaces. This application has 717 bays, so they have to provide at least the 5 minimum, and we're proposing 6 spaces down at the southwest quadrant near the front lobby. So that's the bottom left of this image. Taking a look at the elevation of the building, this is what it would look like from Florida Mango Road. And you can see it's broken up into 2 phases with phase 1 on the right and phase 2 on the left. And finally, our one waiver request, we're requesting a waiver to reduce the minimum lot size requirements for planned developments. 5 acres is required. However, this site, as you know, is 2.6 acres, so we're requesting a reduction of 2.4 acres. I'd also like to point out there's kind of a discrepancy in the code. Section 94207D2 requires 5 acres for all planned developments. However, table 8-3 of 94-243 requires only 10,000 square feet for a general commercial plan development, which this is. However, at the recommendation of staff, we're requesting this waiver from the more restrictive requirement just to make sure that we're in compliance with all parts of the code. We meet all the rezoning standards of 94-32A, as you can see here. And finally, we're all here, our team is here to answer any questions you may have. Staff has recommended approval for this project, and the applicant is in agreement with the one condition of approval included in the staff report. We also went door to door with the neighborhood nearby to the northwest, and we got positive feedback from the most affected neighbors. So we respectfully request your consideration of a recommendation of approval. Thank you.
All right, any questions of the applicant? Let me start with you, Patrick.
No questions.
Gene?
Did the city address your concern with the inconsistency in the code, the 10,000 square feet versus the 5 acres?
There was no addressing that. I think it would probably require a text change. I'm going to let staff speak to that. But again, this part of the code is a little bit more restrictive and it's specific to planned developments. So out of an abundance of caution and trying to meet all the standards of all the code, this is what we requested. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Will, any questions? Peter? Gene? Okay, thank you so much. Can we hear from staff? Oh, you can tell. It's that time of evening. She just doesn't want to take any guff. Go ahead, dear.
Let me get out of this. For the record, Angela Van, Planning and Zoning Administrator. I'm not Kevy. Kevy's on vacation. Just quickly, I won't reiterate what the applicant has said. He's done a thorough job with the application. And just to answer your question, the fact is, I code at the table, which is in part of our section, is not in code. What I'm looking for. Basically, it has not the same as what is actually in the text of the code. We understand that. We know it's a conflict, and we will fix it at some point. But we go with the most stringent rules, which is the 5 acres for commercial or industrial plan development, and we do 10 acres for residential plan development. So I'm not going to again go through most of this stuff. We talked about the waiver reduction and staff findings that it complies with the zoning and land development regulations, section 9432A for the rezoning standards, and basically all of the site design quantitative development standards also in section 9435C. And then just one condition that, well, the trees that it did have on the site, they have to come through and do a true alteration permit submitted and reviewed before they go forth to remove the trees on the property. That concludes staff presentation.
So Angela, we've done this type of waiver a lot, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, basically, as you guys understand, our code is old, and it was basically a lot of our waiver as far as our acreage for planned development were based on suburban out west,
Right.
a lot of for the larger areas. And as we've seen, when you start to redevelop it, infill redevelopment, the lots are smaller, and we basically do this waiver request a lot for infill.
Haven't we even had
Not so much
some-
for commercial, but mostly for residential.
Right. Haven't we even had some like for an acre or less even?
Yeah, I think there's a Burger King that's actually on Belvedere, not far from this,
Yeah.
it's less than an acre.
Yeah,
It's a
okay.
commercial plan development.
And this is an abandoned building
Yes,
that's
the
all
abandoned
cement.
building was the old
And this is
bowling
$17
alley that
million
shut down
investment.
basically
Okay.
during COVID, never reopened.
Questions of staff? Thank you. Would anyone from the public wish to be heard on this application? And if not, we'll bring them back to the board. Any concerns about a $17 million investment for an abandoned building? Okay. All right, looking for a motion.
Oh, it's a shame to lose the bowling alley. That was a cool place, but it's better to
Let's go
have
close
that.
bowling in defense. We can now store the pins and others in the self-storage facility.
I'll make a motion.
I'm looking for a motion. Go ahead,
Sure.
Gene.
I move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval of planning board case number 1937, a request by John Schmidt of Schmidt Nichols on behalf of 2500 North Mango LLC for a rezoning to change the zoning designation of property consisting of approximately 2.6 acres and located at 2500 North Florida Mango Road from general commercial to commercial plan development to allow for the construction of a 108,292 square foot self-storage facility. The planning board finds that approval for development on an area less than 5 acres is justified by the reduction meeting the following findings. A, particular circumstances justify such reductions. B, requirements for plan development district zoning and the benefits to be derived from plan development district zoning can be derived in such lesser area. The motion is based upon testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report,
You're doing great.
which constitute competent, substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application complies with the required standards of sections 94-32A, 94-35C, and 94-207D of the City of West Palm Beach Planning, Zoning, and Redevelopment Regulations. In addition, this recommendation is made subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report dated November 21st, 2023. I move that these conditions are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the zoning and land development regulations in consistency with the comprehensive plan for the City of West Palm Beach.
Okay, we have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. We now move to planning board case 1966.
She looks familiar.
Good evening. My name is Heather Danforth from Integrated Perspectives. I am here for Planning Board Case 1966A. It's a rezoning from multifamily 14 to multifamily 32. Real quick, the developer is here. My name is Heather and his name is Alex. He's sitting here if you have any questions as well. He was here about 3 years ago, and he did Mercer Park, the first, we're calling it Mercer Park 1, and now we're Mercer Park 2.0, right across from the street from the proposed project. And just wanted you to quickly know that it was right there and that this is something that we've done in the city before. So before I get ahead of myself, location. We are in the Jefferson Terminal District. This is a little kind of secluded area just south of downtown on Old Okeechobee. It's a walkable neighborhood. They have the Grandview Market, and they have a couple new projects down there that are the District Flats and the Mercer Park project we just talked about. And something that we always like to say is there's great access here that's close to downtown, it's close to the airport, it's walkable, it's bikeable, closer to Tri-Rail. So with that said, kind of looking close in, the closest intersection to the proposed project is Old Okeechobee and Mercer, and these properties are located just south of there. They're part of 2 blocks, the north block and the south block, and then also a park block on the south part, which is green in the presentation. And again, these are also kind of tucked in between the Mercer Park Apartments, which is our 1.0, and then the District Flats, which is approved and built, that's in the Warehouse District. So our request is to rezone these 18 parcels from MF14 to MF32. This is also going to be part of the resolution with the workforce housing and everything like that too. But I wanted to show you a quick graphic of kind of how this relates in the neighborhood with the Mercer Park, which is the RPD on the left-hand side, to the left, adjacent to the property on the north parcel, and then the District Flats, which is actually a CPD. I kind of changed the colors just to make it easier to read, but it has 32 units an acre too, so that you could see kind of how they related to each other. So the map on the left is the existing, and then the map on the right is the proposed, and you can see how kind of that 32 units an acre is consistent throughout the neighborhood, and then the north property is adjacent to general commercial and industrial. So going back to the 3 blocks, kind of zooming back in again, we have our north block, which is our larger block. It's about a little over 2 acres. Our south block, which is a little over 1 acre. So those will be 2 apartment buildings, and then we have our park block, which is just a small little sliver on the bottom, which will be a passive park. So we're just requesting the rezoning as part of this, application, but we will be doing a site plan approval that's in review with the city right now, but I kind of want to give you like a little taste of what we're proposing. On the north side, we're kind of trying to go with the contemporary aesthetic of Mercer Park Apartments, and so that's where we're proposing kind of more of a contemporary looking building. And we're doing basically all the same things that's happening with Mercer Park and District Flats. We're trying to address the street, provide balconies, do an undulating facade, and then as part of the workforce housing ordinance, we're doing 6 and 8 stories, which is consistent with the height restrictions. And again, we will add workforce housing in this building. Some of the site highlights, we're doing the sidewalks, kind of want to keep it walkable, on-street parking, drainage. We're doing an enhanced drop-off between the 2 buildings so that people can walk in and out, maybe get an Uber from downtown. And we're also doing a large bike storage area, which is in the building for the Mercer Park. That is kind of one of our key ideas here, is that we live in a bikeable city. And we're doing roof amenities on the garage, an outdoor gathering area, all those things. But again, those will go in the site plan approval, but I wanted to show you kind of what we're looking at. And then the south block, so we have the north block, which is the bigger building, and then the south block, which is the smaller building, because we're stepping down and trying to be context sensitive to the neighborhood. This building is kind of going off more of what's happening at the district's flats. It has more of an industrial chic look, so it's kind of bringing the 2 styles together and marrying them in the middle. So here we're going to have integrated art, unique signage. We're going to have perforated metal like balconies, just like the district flats does. And again, we have some cool, unique finishes as well. All the parking on this is at grade, because this is, again, we're trying to step down, and we purposely wanted to make it so we didn't have a big massing next to the neighbors. And again, this one's going to include workforce housing as well. So we have the north building, the south building, and this one also has the same exact set of amenity pieces here. Like, we're doing drainage, we're doing enhanced crosswalks, on-street parking, sidewalks, dual entry, great bike storage, ground parking, integrated amenities integrated the buildings. We're going to have like a ride share area. We're going to have a library, things like that. And then finally, we're proposing a passive park. This will be built and operated by the developer. It will be gated entry, closed at night for safety, lit, but this will be part of the amenities for the area. And this is actually near the park for District Flats. They're kind of on the corner there. We're going to be across the street, and that's kind of more of like a art park with a little more hardscape. This is more like contemplative, passive, walking, sitting, things like that. So going through the standards of review, consistency with the comp plan, we're consistent with the future land use element, the transportation element, and the housing element. We're east of 95, where we're encouraging infill, and that goes along with our traffic, and we're encouraging multimodal transportation with our bike facilities, ride share, sidewalks. We have it all there, plus we're including 61 workforce units. Change conditions, this is an area in transition. There's been an uptick in development in this area. There's been more investments in this area. The city, a few years back, actually conducted a study regarding this. So business frontages are more appealing, and there's more capital projects in the area. So it's an area that has a lot going on for it. Conformance with the code, we are in review for site plan review, and that'll go to City Commission per the resolution. We are requesting a few waivers, one for parking, which is consistent with other developments. We're requesting some waivers and setbacks in order to pull the building up like the other redevelopment projects in the area. Height and density will all be consistent with Resolution 306-22. And then consistency with the surrounding land uses. Really, there's a lot of redevelopment in this area. So north of us, there's a sign up for redevelopment of that property, but I've asked, and there's been no application submitted, but there, again, something for redevelopment. On the west side of us, this is actually a little bit backwards, I'm sorry. It's a single family, multifamily in the Mercer Park Apartments, which we talked about. And then on the east of us is an industrial site, which is being used just for car storage. And again, it's just an area that possibly could be redeveloped as well. South of us is also multifamily and single family. We're not requesting a future land use amendment as part of this. We are consistent with our future land use currently. Capacity for public facilities, we've received our SCAD determination, our traffic meets Palm Beach County standards, and we're under review for drainage, water, everything that we'll move forward on. Natural environment, most of this area has already been developed, so we're not impacting any natural areas. We're working with staff to preserve some trees and put them into that park. Property values, we definitely see that this would encourage better property values in the area. Right now, some of these areas are being used for storage or apartment rentals or things like that. I don't know what happened. This project's in line with the continued growth. So the development pattern, we really feel like there is a new vision for the area. I think it's a mix of private developments and the city kind of working together. This property is actually at an important intersection in the area, Mercer and Okeechobee. And so this area seems like this would be the place to put increased height because of both the important intersection and also the relationship to the surrounding land uses and zoning. We are adding workforce housing, which again is a policy through the city to push. And then we are making the north building larger and higher mass and then lower on the south building to respond to the environment around us. And then the passive park is kind of stepping down into the neighborhood. And again, right now the tallest building in the area is public storage, so now we can say it's this beautiful residential building. With that, I want to end with a few pictures. We have done public outreach. We had a public meeting. We had 14 attendees, which I was actually a little excited about. We listened to everyone's concerns. We've been working with them. Some people are here to talk for and against, and we have all been having our conversations moving forward. And we also have done lots of one-on-ones. We had one particularly today where we got another letter of support, so we're up to 13 letters of support for this project. And if you look to the map to the left, the purple is the areas where those letters of support represent those properties in the area. So with that, again, we're requesting to rezone the property from MF14 to MF32, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions? Let me start on this side, Patrick.
Yeah, so based on the proposal that you're putting forward in conjunction with this, you would be the highest residential building in Mercer Park, correct?
Yes, we would, and we'd meet the height standards that are in the resolution.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Gene, any questions? Will?
So what's your height compared to District Flats?
District Flats is 4 stories. Our south building is 4 stories, and the north building, which is next to the general commercial and the industrial, is 6 and 8 stories.
6 and 8 stories.
Yeah, we're kind of tapering it down to kind of give like a cape-like look, and we do some undulating facade just to try to make it look more visually appealing instead of just like a big box.
Gotcha. And then you said that there was going to be parking in the larger building. But then you also said that you were going to request waivers on parking. So what is your eventual parking going to look like?
So we have a parking garage in the north building, and then in the south building, we're just doing surface parking. So there'll be parking in both buildings. Our waiver for parking is for 20 parking spaces based off code, but we have full ITE calculations, and we're way over that.
So, forgive me, but at grade means on the street?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize. It's not in a structured parking building, it's just on ground level.
But so is it a...
Underneath the building, probably.
Like is it a parking lot?
Yeah. So
at ground, okay.
So there's no building there, yeah. It's just, like a parking lot with landscape around the edge.
Okay.
All right, well, any questions? All right, Peter? No. Deborah? All right, well, thank you. Can we hear from staff?
Okay, so Valentina Broglia, planner with the City of West Palm Beach for Mercer Park Homes 2, Planning Board case number 1966A for a rezoning. Just real quick, the subject property is made up of 18 parcels right now. They're all zone single-family low density. Mercer Park 1, which is directly west of the subject property, was approved in 2019 with the rezoning of multifamily high-density MF32 and a further rezoning to residential plan development. Mercer Park 2 will not need a further rezoning to plan development because it is proposed under Resolution 30622. So the request is for the rezoning to go from multifamily low density MF14 to multifamily high density MF32. Staff is recommending approval. It does comply with section 9432A of the rezoning standards. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Questions of staff? Let me start with you, Deborah. Any questions? Peter? None. Questions?
So what's the height of Mercer Park 1?
Mercer Park 1, I believe, is 4 stories? 3 stories and 38 feet.
Okay, so the larger the building is that across from Mercer Park 1? And then the smaller
We should ask her, or he needs to step forward and.
Yes, it is going to be directly west. Mercer 1 is directly west to the tallest building in Mercer Park 2.
Okay, so Mercer Park 1 is here, Mercer Park 2, the bigger one is here, and then the smaller one is here.
Yes.
If there was a record made, that might be. All right. Any other questions of staff?
I have a question.
And if not, we have a number from.
Question, sorry,
go ahead,
Steve.
Patrick.
So, in the current zoning on the property, what is the maximum height allowance?
So in the current zoning, which is MF14, the height will be a max of 30 feet. But because this is under Resolution 30622, it does allow for a different height. It would not follow MF14.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? And if not, we have several cards. Judy Labovit, if you come forward. Luis Morale, be 2 on that podium, and if J.W. Schmidt and Matthew Boyd on the other one. It really doesn't matter which ones, but if you could come forward and go ahead, please.
Sure, thank you. I own the building at
If
1220.
you, I'm so sorry, ma'am, if you could just state your name for the record.
Oh,
and I-
Judy Liebovit. I own the building at 1220 Okeechobee Road. It's a commercial bakery. I've been there for 22 years. As everybody knows, that street is heavily populated. I was one of the first commercial properties there. There's now a biscuit lady, there's a pipe person, there's a beer garden. There's no extra parking on that street at all. My concern is that because this is such a big property, they will take the majority of the side street as well as my street that I'm on. And also, just if I pull out of my parking lot to the left, you're not allowed to park there. So there's a sign there that says no parking. I have delivery trucks, and there's no parking.
Thank you, ma'am.
It
All right.
shouldn't go through, I mean, if they're gonna build a 3-story, that would be great, but anything else is really going to hurt our street.
Thank you. Come forward, sir.
My name is Louis Murillo. I live at 1290 Alpha Street. I wanted to thank you for your time and for the opportunity for us to speak here this evening. I have a couple of comments in regards to the new development. By the way, I'm an architect as well. I'm familiar with some of the things that are going on in the area. I just finished the restoration of Palm Beach Towers. The first issue that I have is traffic. If you're not familiar with Mercer Street or Mercer Avenue, it's a very wide road, very dark, and cars fly through that street. There's been very intense traffic accidents right at the corner of Mercer and Old Okeechobee Road. I never seen one police officer nearby, and things are completely out of control. I live on Alpha Street, same thing. Very high-speed cars going through there, okay? 2 of my neighbors have lost cats because they have been run over by cars. And last week, we had a stop sign knocked down. In addition to that, as the previous person spoke, parking. We have now a tow trucks being parked on Alpha Street, okay? The Alpha Street is very narrow, okay? You put one car there, you can't see the traffic coming on the other direction. Okay, so that's a big problem. The stop sign was knocked out on the corner last week, right on the corner where one of those trucks was parked. So there's no enforcement of any kind there. I don't see any solution for it. All I can see right now is that sooner or later there's going to be a tragic accident somewhere on Mercer Avenue or on Alpha Street. We're just waiting for that to happen. So something has to be done. This is the safety and security of the community. So that is number one. So hopefully with this development, and I have spoken with Alex, I think there's a couple of things that could be done, but I think more has to be done. Because as an architect, I know that once the development occurs, there's going to be many different things that are going to affect the traffic area and circulation around a new development. Now, the second thing is the building itself. I'm right at the corner of Alpha and Mercer Avenue. So the building is going to be basically right in front of me. I just bought my house 2 years ago. It's a brand new house. And the building is going to be 8 stories high on my side. From an architectural point of view, a building of that magnitude doesn't fit the environment. It's going to be the largest, tallest building in blocks all around. Okay, so that is a concern of mine.
I'm so sorry, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, Board. Jeremy William Schmidt. I'm a resident of Pineapple Park, along with my fiance. We own a building on Longwood Street, and as the director of Palm Beach Affordable Corporation, we support the project. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, if we could, while you're coming, if I've called some of these people earlier, please, Matthew Boyd, Judy Torres, James Casares, and Ethan Clark. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my name is Matthew Boyd, 1220 Alpha Street. The property directly adjacent west to the southern parcel, the 4-story. I don't really have too objection towards them building onto both the parcels, the north and south, because new development is always a good thing, especially since they're doing workforce housing. The Alpha Street, Wilkins, and Mercer Ave, all 3 of those streets, as well as the neighboring streets, would do greatly with new development coming in there and correcting those and redesigning those streets. My concern is really with them being rezoned to MF32. Being rezoned to that, including the workforce housing that they're requesting to obtain, gives them that density increase to double their density to not MF32, but 264. So they'll be having a 245 unit development there. That 8-story going from the development of a 4-story to 8-story to 6 is inconsistent with what's currently there. District Flats, the one that they bring up that was built there, when we built it, they stepped down from 4 stories to 3 to help blend better with the current low density environment that the neighborhood has. And then as the lady before mentioned about parking, the fact that they're requesting waivers for parking while also asking to increase their density, it does not make sense, because driving around the Jefferson Terminal District, the parking is there's not enough parking as there is. People park along the streets, and it just is not adequate enough for that. But that's all I have to say about this.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ethan Clark, and I live at 1222 Alpha Street. Those 2 of my neighbors just spoke. One of the things that they seem to have kind of massaged in their explanation of the consistency with the neighborhood is that the 3 houses that just spoke are right in front of the 8 stories. They talk about the step back, but that step back is done towards Longwood. It is not done towards the rest of Alpha Street. If they are going to be adding a park, I would recommend that the site plan have the park in front of the 3 single-family homes on Alpha Street and not on Longwood, which is kind of tucked away in an area that nobody's going to use, besides on a prime area that more of the single-family residents would be able to use, and it wouldn't be an 8-story building in front of the single-family homes. I also believe that MF32 is not consistent with the neighborhood. The rest of the neighborhood is MF14. I also believe that if you're going to be doing an MF32 for kind of an L shape on the block, you should extend that MF32 for the rest of the single-family homes that are on that block already, so we would potentially get a value increase in our property values in the future. If you're going to do some weird L and just carve out the parking lot that has the dumpsters behind my house, then I would appreciate some type of increase in my property value in the future by having the entire block be consistent zoning. I also believe that the street is too small for this size. As our neighbors pointed out, there's currently street parking that we can park in front of our houses, but when somebody does that, it's literally a one-lane road. So when you're going to have 200 plus units, and the way that the parking garage is designed, they would drive down Alpha Street to get to the parking garage. So you're talking about, if there's one car parked in the block, a single lane road with 200 potential units being served with where the actual parking garage is. So I think the site plan needs to be changed. I know that's not for this meeting specifically, but in general, I believe that if you are going to do the change, you need to do it for the entire block or the entire area, not just these single parcels, because it's a weird carve out on a block and where the single family homes will not get the benefit of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Judy Torres still here?
Judy's not here.
Okay. Let's see. She
I'm-
says I approve on the back here. And you're James?
I'm James Kazaris.
Okay, you're the last one. Go ahead, sir.
4136 Willow Bay Drive, Winter Garden. I represent investors that have invested in this community, and they're excited about this project. They see it enhancing value, enhancing the community, and they're in favor of the project.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone from the public who has not been heard who wishes to be heard on this matter? And if not, I'll invite the applicant, if she wishes, to respond to some of the concerns you had raised, which included traffic, parking, size, and I'm sure you picked up some other things too.
Okay, great, thank you. Regarding Judy's comment, she was worried about on-street parking. We are adding on-street parking adjacent to all of the properties of the site. We're adding sidewalks, on-street parking, and then also we're doing traffic calming. We're raising sidewalks. We're doing sidewalks with special pavers, things like that to help with traffic calming. So we're trying to slow people down, but also add on-street parking. Also, I'd like to point out that it does meet the county's transportation performance standards. The TPS report is in there, and I believe I've emailed it to a few of the residents as well. So traffic has been met. Our parking is above far of the International Transportation Engineers requirements for parking, so we're meeting minimum standards. I think the city's code is really still suburban, and we're really close to it, so it's not like we're adding a lot of extra parking. And from a market standpoint, we have more than what we need. We're not worried about parking kind of dripping out into the neighborhood. Regarding Ethan's comment, we can't rezone properties that aren't ours, but I understand his concerns. These are the properties that were put together for this development. Again, we're adjacent to both commercial and industrial, and then we are also furthering the city's policy for providing workforce housing. We're creating 2 beautiful buildings, and we're putting workforce housing in both of the buildings. And that is why there's the density bonus, and that is why there's the height bonus, is to further workforce housing in the city.
Thank you. All right. Any questions we have of staff? Do we want to bring them up? Or if not, let's talk. What are people's thoughts, concerns?
I just have one. To the gentleman that is concerned with all the accidents and traffic, I was wondering if you reached out to Christy Fox, your commissioner, and make her aware of the issues in that neighborhood. So perhaps you should follow up with her, and she could be more helpful in helping with the traffic situation.
All right, with regard to the application before us. Go ahead, Patrick.
First, I'd like to compliment the project. Beautiful project, designed very well. I appreciate what you're trying to do in terms of the sensitivity of the neighborhood and some of the materials. But I think that earlier tonight we saw a positive example of Section 306-22 being implemented. I feel like this is not a good example of it, and I think it has largely to do with the context of the neighborhood and the size that we're looking at. I mean, an 8-story apartment building in Mercer Park, I mean, that's something that you would see more across the street downtown here. That would be excessively high for that neighborhood, and I feel for the single-family homes that are there across the street. I think a version of this project could proceed similar to the beautiful project across the street that they've already accomplished. It's of a smaller scale, but I can't support this request as is. I think the neighborhood cannot handle it.
Gene, I'm going to come down to you, work my way down. What are your thoughts on the application?
I have no comment.
Will, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Patrick. I think that I think the size of an 8-story building is really not conducive or not consistent. You have the 3-story, and then you have the lower one. I'd like to see some more variation in the height rather than be the largest kid on the block. I do understand the concerns about the size of the streets and the parking. Also, it would be really interesting to know what the parking plan is for the construction folks. So I've experienced that myself here in the city, where construction folks are parking all over the streets during the issue, making it more difficult for the residents. So.
Thank you.
No,
Peter, your
no
thoughts?
comments.
Deborah, your thoughts? Not required to, I just want to give everyone the opportunity to. Go ahead.
Just a couple of comments. I don't live far away from where this is, and the higher proposed development site is inconsistent with that area. I saw on the presentation where there was a community meeting or a charrette, and I'm just wondering if you have plans for more so that you can have those conversations with the residents in that area. Maybe some others couldn't make that one meeting. But I think discussions should go on because the parking is more than tight for what's there now. And I don't remember what you said about the parking for Building B, or that I think that's where the parking is going to be on the street. Street parking over there is horrendous.
Me, this is,
Just
we
my
can't call you
comment.
up, thank you.
I'm not asking you a direct question, but street parking right now over there is just, it's horrendous.
No.
And I just think it's always a good plus with the development coming in to talk more with those residents, and you never know what benefit that can bring.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to share my thoughts as well. I think you're hearing from the group that this is not likely going to pass. I will be supporting it. I like when we have divided votes because a lot of times I'm conflicted myself. And so a divided vote really reflects my true views. With regard to parking, though, we've dealt with this issue time and time again, and the applicant's correct when she says the city standards are outdated. We have consistently retreated from it because it's just not accurate anymore, and the standard she's citing is one the city's more relying on.
Right.
So it sounds like the parking is covered. That does not mean that people, even though they have adequate parking at their facility, may not still use street parking. But that can't be helped. They met their burden when they supplied more than enough internal parking. Of that, I'm satisfied. I have concerns about the height, although I think this neighborhood's changing too. And, when you think about so many areas of the city that have been transformed, the first building, the second building, the third building, I think we're going through a transformation. I have no doubt that when this history is written on that part of the city, there are going to be buildings like the ones you're seeing proposed here. I would say to the applicant, we're only a recommending board. Understand that. There's still opportunities to convince the city commission. There's still opportunities to refine your proposal. And that happens a lot with regard to height and massing issues. What's initially presented to the planning board sometimes changes by the time it gets to the city commission. You make your own political calculations as to how you think this thing here goes. I'm so sorry, sir, no, our public part's over. But in any event, I will look for a motion.
Chair,
My read of it is
Chair,
that the majority
Chair.
may be against this,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm often wrong.
Chairman, staff hates to interrupt, but I just want to make a point and I ask the city staff attorney. This is for the rezoning and rezoning, period. Has nothing to do with the height, nothing to do with the traffic,
Right.
has nothing to do with that. So
No, I-
if you're gonna make your motion based on that, it's based on the standards that's in the staff report. Is MF 32 compatible with the surrounding areas
But
based on
Angela,
that?
would it not be fair to say that if we approve the zoning change,
Mm-hmm.
this is the type of building that we would be allowing?
Not necessarily. I mean, ultimately, that's what the 30622 allows. But again, staff and the city commission has the ultimate say on what will actually go and be constructed on that site. Has to go to city commission for special review to approve it based on affordable housing. That's what the applicant's proposing. That's what the regulations may allow. But, staff still has to evaluate that. That's what we're currently looking at.
I
as we're
appreciate it.
working with the
I think
development.
it's a fair point you raised, and one you've made in other applications as
Correct.
well. Go ahead,
And-
Gene,
And
you
I
wanna
think
add?
that, in that case, we're still asking for an increase on zoning density, and the contiguous densities around it, I think, are not consistent. So I think it's consistent from a zoning, inconsistent from a zoning perspective as well.
Gene, do you want to say something?
So I will say if the taller property had been on the south, I probably would object to the height, but I think it transitions because you have commercial property to the north and commercial property to the east. So I personally don't have a problem with the height.
We could have a tie here. Who
Well,
knows?
yeah, I don't have an issue either with the building height or what they're proposing. This is the first step only. It's a zoning change. When it comes to parking and traffic, will be dealt with at site plan and by staff and other departments in the city. So I don't have any problem with the
Patrick, I'll let you
applicant.
make the opportunity to make the first motion,
No?
if you wish to make it.
I would make a motion to deny on the basis that it's inconsistent.
We have the printed motion because we have to articulate the reason for a denial.
Right.
I think we'll be at 3-3 times. That means it won't pass.
We
Yes.
have the motion.
Yeah, I move that the planning board recommend to the city commission denial of the planning board case number 1966A, a request by Heather Danford on behalf of Alexander Milan, owner of Mercer Park Homes LLC, for a rezoning to change the zoning designation of the subject properties from multifamily low-density residential MF14 to multifamily high-density residential MF32 to allow for the construction of 2 apartment buildings totaling 245 units. This motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application does not comply with all the required standards in section 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations. The standards that have not been met include the following. And I would suggest the context of the surrounding zoning district, which is,
What does the attorney say?
Okay, let's read these down, Mr. Marshall.
Standards are listed there. You can read the ones that's not met.
Oh. I would say standard 4, land use consistency. I would say that it is inconsistent.
Mr.
And-
Thomas,
and
is that
also-
sufficient? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Also, number 8, orderly development. That
Okay, we have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
A motion and second. Is there further discussion on the pending motion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Favor of the denial.
Right, the pending motion, which is to deny it.
Aye.
Aye, and with 2. Is there any more than the 2? And if not, the motion fails. We're looking for then a new motion.
I'll move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval of planning board case number 1966A, a request by Heather Danford on behalf of Alexander Millen, owner of Mercer Park Homes LLC, for a rezoning to change the zoning designation of the subject properties from multifamily low-density residential MF14 to multifamily high-density residential MF32 to allow for the construction of 2 apartment buildings totaling 245 units. The motion is based upon the testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted in the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application complies with the required standards, sections 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations.
We have a motion. Have we a second? Motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is that 4 votes? And all those opposed?
No.
nay.
Okay, so it passes 4 to 2. Thank you.
We needed a
Yeah.
little tension tonight.
We now move, I believe, to our last case. Yes, Planning Board Case 1887A.
Oh, my God.
No, my friend, really?
You're kidding me, this is all against it? Oh, wow. What's with this dogs?
Sigh.
Good evening.
All right, go ahead. Please state your name and proceed.
Noor Darwish with Schmidt Nichols on behalf of the applicant today to represent the Elba major amendment application. I'm going to start with a quick site analysis. The site is located between 46th and 47th Street. It totals about 1.73 acres. About a half acre from that is submerged land. The site is situated between an intercoastal to the east, single and multifamily to the west, single family to the north, and a multifamily to the south. The current site has a current approval for a 21-story, 55 multifamily units. There's no change has been proposed to the approved use. This application was actually, the dock that we're proposing was a part of the approved application before. We had to pull it out because we did not have the Army Corps approval, so we're coming back to add the dock now. The request is a 222 feet long dock. It's a residential dock with 8 slips and 2 boat lifts. In addition to that, we are requesting 4 additional waivers. One for the dock's length, as the code permits a 100 feet long dock. We're proposing a 222 feet. The second waiver we're proposing is an additional 1 foot of a setback encroachment onto the north side of the property. The third one we're proposing is a reduction on the driveway separation. Code requires 125 feet. We're proposing a 71 feet 8 inches. And then the fourth waiver we're proposing is a reduction in the landscape buffer. Due to the placement of the FBL transformers, code requires 109 foot buffer. We are proposing a 71. As I mentioned, this application is to construct a residential dock, 2,222 feet. The dock is going to be within the limits of the submerged land owned by the owner of the site. It is going to be replacing the already existing dock. It's going to be relocated 30 feet to the north of the property so that it's in the center of the building. It is going to be a private dock to be used by the Alba condominium residences only. Constructing the dock is going to increase the property value. We do have the Property Department Environmental Protection and the Army Corps approval. We are also proposing a setback encroachment to the northern portion of the site. The code allows a maximum of 4 feet encroachments into the setback, but because we have a limited size in the north-south direction, we needed an additional foot for the placement of the mechanical equipment. We reached out to the neighbor to the north, and we have a letter of support into the encroachments that we're proposing. We're also proposing a waiver for the separation of access. Code requires us to provide 125 feet. We are proposing a 71 feet and 8 inches because of the placement of these transformers. The previous approved plan was approved to reduce the separation by 44 feet and 7 inches. We're just adding 8 feet and 5 inches to this application because we had to add just the FPL transformers, so we had to accommodate that. And finally, we are proposing a landscape buffer length reduction. Because of the placement of these transformers, we had to the placement of these transformers were placed under the property line. We worked closely with the FPL engineers to negotiate the placement of these transformers to see multiple locations. However, the locations that they are placed are right now, was identified to be the best location. These transformers are going to be screened properly from the right-of-way, and this project meets all of the landscape requirements. The reduction of the landscape buffer is not gonna cause any shortness into the landscaping as it's gonna be screened. We worked closely with staff to make sure that we accommodate all of the city standards. We comply with all of the amendment standards in sections 9432 and in section 9436 E3, 4, and 5, and in section 94.313 A3, A through R. We have a staff recommendation of approval with conditions. The owner is in agreement with all 4 conditions provided by staff. And this concludes my presentation. We respectfully request your approval tonight.
All right, thank you. Any questions of staff?
Of the applicant, you mean?
Oh, forgive me. Of the applicant. It's getting late. Any questions of the
I
applicant?
have a question.
Go ahead, please.
Can you clarify the relationship between the property owner and the residential plan development? So the parcel is owned by Scuba Club?
Yes, it is owned by the same owner.
Okay, and then Alba Residences is,
So the owner of the Alba Residences owns the parcel. Portion of this parcel is a submerged land. The use of the Alba Residences, we're not proposing any change to that. We're just only adding the dock into the submerged portion of the property. It's under the same owner, so the owner would be owning both.
okay. And is this like some sort of a common area for the Alba Residences, or is it completely separate in terms of use? So
It is going to be private only for the Alba Residences, the dock, you mean, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is your question, is this something available for all the residents potentially, or is this gonna be like a separate enterprise?
Right.
Do you understand the question? I'm not sure we're articulating it right.
Is it for only certain residences or all residents?
I believe it's for all the residences?
The ones with money.
Sorry, John Schmidt, agent for the applicant. I've been sworn in. So it is limited, it's limited to the use. Those will be on a rotationary basis. It might be a lease. But the end one is a transitional dock for if people want to go to the club and get on a boat.
But the idea in
they'll be
theory,
assigned,
it's
they'll be assigned to a
open-
resident. They'll be assigned to a resident, the 8 slips.
Okay.
Like reserved parking.
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
but this is
correct.
also for commercial use or no?
No, not at all, no.
Okay.
So the end pier would allow, the end pier would allow maybe a yacht to come up, or a taxi service, in the future as we come here and go up to Peanut Island or go down to the yacht club or some other restaurant along the water. But all the slips themselves will be assigned to a specific resident. Does that answer? I'm sorry.
It's kind of confusing because there's different ownership, right? Because
Absolutely.
there's.
Yeah, I think the question is that gonna be like a separate, like, business owned by the other owner, and then he leases out to who wishes, or is this gonna be controlled by the association?
It's going to be controlled by the association.
I think that addresses
But not
that.
owned by the association.
No, no, the association, you'll either purchase it, as part of your condominium unit, or it will be assigned, so it could be a yearly assignment.
Yeah, but if it's a limited common element of the residence, then it should be owned by the residents, not a separate entity. I don't see the nexus, I just don't, I can't make the
Well,
connection.
we actually, I lived in the Tiara condominium years, and what do you call that thing where the common areas are actually still owned by the developer?
Right.
So, I
Okay.
don't know if it's any different than that.
Mr. Chair and Board, if I can remind the Board, we just did this identical thing with the Alara development a month or two ago. They sought 7 slips, so they had a dock, and again, the
Gene didn't
residents
pick
were
up
going
this interesting issue before.
Right, but it's owned by Olara, correct?
Yeah.
And they have non-contiguous riparian rights as an Olara. We're making reference to this Alba Residences, but then it's a completely separate owner of an adjacent lot, and it's entitled Scuba Club, so I'm thinking scuba chartering, or, that's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it used to be the
It
Scuba
used,
Club.
I'm sorry, it used to be called the Scuba Club, I'm sorry. The property was originally owned by the Scuba Club.
Okay.
And so the application was called Scuba Club when we came in, and it had been rebranded to Alba. So the land was just a Scuba Club. I'm sorry, that's causing the confusion.
okay.
Noreen Rouse was the owner.
All right, your question addressed,
They used to
Okay.
scuba dive.
Sorry
with
about
her.
Any other questions of the applicant?
And I scuba dive with the Scuba Club, so I was kind of confused.
All right, thank you so much. Can we hear from staff?
All right, good day, everyone. Jermaine Swaby, Planning and Zoning Senior Planner. I'll be presenting Planning Board Case number 1887A. So this is a request for a major plan development amendment for the subject property, which is located at 4708-4714 North Flagler Drive. The property is zoned Alba Residences Residential Plan Development, and it's 1.73 acres in size. So a bit on the history, the Alba Residences was formerly known as the Scuba Club, as was previously stated. All the buildings associated with this previous development has been demolished, and the property is presently vacant. In 2015, the subject property was approved for construction of a 28-unit multifamily development, which was never built. The entitlements continued for this development order extension. In 2022, the resolution 2-22 was approved by the City Commission for the construction of a 55-unit development and rezoning from a multifamily high-density residential to the Alba Residences residential plan development that we have presently. So today, the applicant is seeking a major amendment to the already approved plan development. So we have the video here. Before I started, you're looking at the intersection of 46th Street and North Flagler.
This is fancy. This is a first. I like it.
Right, so
I know,
we're
you spoiled
heading
us
north,
now.
and
The scene of the accident.
so as you can see, if you look in, the property has a deeper length from east to west versus north to south, and we're walking and we're pretty much
You walk too
almost at the
slow.
end. Yeah, it doesn't take long. We're almost at the end of the property, which ends at the intersection of 47th Street and North Flagler. So here we are. All right, so with the approval of the waivers, the request will comply with the amendment standards and requirements for the length of docks. Staff finds that subject to the conditions of approval, the amendment with the request for waivers comply with standards required by the city's comprehensive plan and zoning and land development regulations. Staff therefore recommends approval with the conditions that, 1, advertising signage is prohibited on the dock. 2, prior to scheduling a public hearing before the City Commission, the applicant shall work with staff to resolve all outstanding comments from the Plans and Plat Review Committee. 3, any required easement, drainage, utility, public access, outfall shall be provided via plat separate legal instrument. And the 4th, the applicant and successors and assigns shall be responsible for the maintenance of the roadway, landscaping, and irrigation. This will be through a separate maintenance agreement with the city. And any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead.
If we don't approve the transformers, can the zoning allow a flashlight and candlelight shop across the street?
Are you concerned about just the size, the length, the amount of the waiver? I mean, we get these dock requests, and they seem to be reaching further and further and further out.
Okay, so for the dock, just to backtrack a bit, previously there was the approval for the PD. So there was an agreement between the applicant and the city that in exchange for not building out on the land, which they had a right to, they would get certain incentives development-wise.
Right.
So they got the density, and logically, the dock is still within that length, the property line length of the submerged land. So
one of the waivers is not the length of the dock.
yes, the length of the dock, because still by code, the maximum is 100 feet, but they're building out at the length which is still within the submerged land's limit.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm not, I see Rick, Rick knows how confused I get, so he's getting experience in cutting through the chase.
Rick Green, Development Services Director. I just wanted to point out that, as Angela mentioned at the outset of the meeting when she was doing her planning board update, we brought 4 docks to the City Commission at the last meeting. During one of the 4 dock applications, one of the commissioners asked us if we would revisit the 100-foot dock length, because so many of the docks need to extend beyond that 100 feet. So we did pledge that we would do an analysis and we'd bring it back through the process.
Right.
And that's probably a code amendment that we will be doing, because virtually everybody, as a result of seagrasses or other reasons, need to go beyond that 100 feet. So we're going to do an in-depth analysis.
Are we comfortable, is it 300 feet? What are they asking here?
222.
222. Is that within the range of what we've been allowing in the past? I just lose track.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the location because of the design of Flagler Drive in particular in the north end, where, depends on whether it's curving in or it's curving out.
And the location of the channel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of that depends, as you've heard testimony in the past, with the location of the seagrass beds and where they are, the plants in the water. And then the depth of the boat also has to be figured into the
Yeah, but people can get bigger and bigger boats, so that's always a moving proposition,
I mean, what staff is looking for typically is that DEP approval and the Army Corps approval.
Okay, so
provided they
that's
have
your,
that,
that's your
they're
guiding.
They're doing that, a lot of that analysis for us as part of that
I
review.
see, I see. No, I appreciate those thoughts.
How long is the current dock?
30 feet, right?
It's 100.
Oh, 100.
It's what?
No, it's 30. I thought you said,
It's probably, sorry, John Schmidt, it's probably 30 to 40 feet. It's
So this
located-
would be longer.
it's good. This would be longer, yes. I think what's also different, worked on some of the docks, and that this is actually within our property line, even though the lands are submerged, some of the other ones were going out into the, off their property line. This
No,
one's
I'm
within
just,
our-
I'm just
No,
making an
that's a-
observation
that's a
because of
fair
the lead
point what you're
picture.
raising.
Right, so this lead picture,
Uh-huh, yep.
the dock to your north is significantly further
Oh,
out.
yes, absolutely,
than
yeah.
the dock that you currently have. So, I mean, it's not gonna be, inconsistent with the other dock land.
And as he points, out, it's within their submerged lands.
Right,
which I
it's
think-
within our submersion. It also
Yes, it
brings it
will.
up to compliance because it moving it north is in the middle third of the property
Right.
versus in its location now, which could cause some navigational items to the south. So
Yeah,
moving it up
okay.
here will clarify that. The seagrass, while I'm up here, the seagrass studies, the navigable waterways have all been checked out by the Army Corps as well as the DEP.
I appreciate it. All right, we have a number from the public who wish to be heard, so I'm going to call their names out at each podium, please. James Barnes. Can you make up that last name? Chrome? Okay, oops, excuse me. Louise Stoney and Kim Barbary. Now, some of these real quick. James Barnes, for example, there's a written comment. Would you like me to read the written comment? Okay, you just want to wait. Okay. Okay, we need you to come forward if you wish to be heard.
Sure.
I can't put you to the end. If you wish to come heard, please come forward. No, you go ahead, ma'am. You go ahead.
I'm happy to.
My name is Louise Stoney. I own a condo at Eaton House, which is right next door to this Alba Tower. And I'm actually opposed to all four of these waivers, but the one I want to really speak to right now is the dock. And what you have in front of you is a picture. Did you not get one? I thought there were 6 of them. Okay, sorry, okay. Okay, sorry. So anyway, what you see here is a Google Earth picture. And what I want you to see is the darker blue is the deeper water. But when I say deep, it's all relative. The smaller dock that you see here that's in the darker blue, that's our dock. My boat is there, as my colleagues here, my neighbors, their boats are all there. I can tell you that at low tide, it's 1.5 feet deep there. Look at where they're going to put in this dock for Alba. See the seagrass? You can see the seagrass on this picture. There is no way that we're in these waters all the time in our boats. We can't even have inboard motors on our boats. You have to lift the outboard because the water is so shallow. How in the world are they going to build a dock there without dredging? I cannot believe they got EPA approval for that. You can see the seagrass on this picture. Every day we see sea turtles, we see manatees, we see stingrays, all sorts of fish. This is an active, live waterway. So I honestly cannot see how it is possible for them to build this dock the way they're planning without serious damage to the waterway. And also, quite frankly, yachts? How are you going to put a yacht there? We can barely have a boat that's not an outboard motor. So this makes absolutely no sense. And then, since I have a few more minutes, since the bell rang...
You see the time right there, ma'am. We have a minute,
Okay,
5 seconds left.
Okay. Regarding the other waivers about wanting to have more room for their transformers, this building is too big. If you want room for your transformers, make the building smaller. I completely understand and agree, actually, with going up rather than going out. Unfortunately, Alba went both up and out. They've taken up every inch of this property. My bedroom window is going to be 15 feet from the wall of their tower. And it's based, I can see from those pictures, they're not even having the landscape buffer that we were promised, the 5 feet of landscape buffer. So this building is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a serious problem, and something needs to be done about it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hey, I'm James Barnes, 5307 Spruce and 501 52nd, eccentric energy electrical contractor, licensed here in West Palm Beach, state of Florida. These docks, I work on them. They bring a lot of pollutants. They cause a lot of damage going in. and they will definitely destroy sea life, manatees, which are, like the lady mentioned before, on the decline. They're coming back a little bit because of the lettuce feeding program, but, you know, we shouldn't be feeding lettuce to manatees. They should thrive naturally. The FPL plant is right up the intercoastal. They naturally congregate to that area. I heard you guys talking about the dock length and such and how many boats, but you didn't ask how big these boats were going to be. You didn't ask what size electrical you're going to put out there for the boats. What kind of dock is it? I didn't hear any of those questions asked. And it doesn't really seem like it matters. I think this is basically a rubber stamp board. But maybe I'm wrong. Prove me wrong, I guess. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, is Lima Croft Kiroff lives at 47th Street? I know she's against the waivers, is what she wrote down. And Kim Barbary, did we hear from you? Come forward, please. Okay.
So,
Oh, there you go. That's your writing?
yeah,
Okay.
it is what it is.
Thank
I
you.
won't get the kudos for the penmanship.
No, not this, I'm afraid.
Maybe you like the way I speak better.
Fair enough.
Okay, we can't all be good at everything.
Right.
Just to piggyback, it's really unfortunate that we are, kind of left here without having the great visuals. That was a fantastic picture, but unfortunately it wasn't put up on the screen for all to see. And this leaves everybody at a disadvantage. Also, I'll speak to the fact with that same thought in mind. We hear about the Durham approval and what was the Army Corps of Engineers, we hear about the approval. But there are no visuals. There are no visuals to look at as to what the sea life looks like, what the depths of the ocean look like, how far out that extension of the dock would actually be. I mean, we're really at a disadvantage here. I'm sure you can see my point, and seeing is very important. So it doesn't really sit very well with the people who live here that are going to have to deal with all of these, supposed changes and just hear, well, this has been approved, that has been approved, bop, 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 it's all ready to go. But we have nothing to look at. We have nothing to compare to. We have nothing to stake, say, hey, take a look at that. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't look right. So, what my neighbor said here about the rubber stamp, I mean, that's kind of what it seems like to us. There's not enough of a preponderance of the evidence and the impact environmentally and to our neighborhood. What does this all mean? I mean, you need to just take it back a few steps and give us some consideration. Given, consideration to the people who live here, to the life that's in the sea, to what's going on, and to the environment. These are really important subjects that you're dealing with. And it's just not all cookie cutter. This is a residential neighborhood, just like they talked about the impact on the smaller residential neighborhood that you were mentioning, Mercer Park, and that the proposed new development was incongruent. It's obvious that these big buildings in a small, mostly single-family residential neighborhood, there have only been 2 existing high-rises in the Northwood Harbor area. So you've made that point about Mercer Park. We're asking you to look at it from our perspective. These are small single-family homes getting squeezed in by these big buildings, and it seems that development and the city doesn't give a hoot about the environment either. And these are serious questions. They're questions about the future of not only West Palm Beach, the future of our planet. So if you don't start taking a look at what's important and preserving what we have, there'll be nothing left to preserve. So don't tread so quickly to rubber stamp and say, oh, it's what's 100 feet. Oh, what's another this? Moving all these things around causes problems.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
listening.
Is there anyone else who has not been heard, who wishes to be heard on this? Please come forward. Sir, did you provide a card earlier? I may have it here. What's your name, sir? Just tell me your name, please. State your name for the... I'm sorry?
Stephen Allen, 4700 North Flagler
I don't
Drive.
see it here, but don't worry. Go ahead, and then we'll sort it out later.
Well, there's one thing that you all haven't considered that's a very interesting thing on that plan. They're putting a pump-out station. A pump-out station is where they
They pump out the toilets on a boat that you would do in a commercial dock, like a fuel dock. Now, why would, if it's just a little residential dock going out 200 feet, why would they have a pump out station? The only reason you have a pump out station is you have major yachts like Rybovich to pump out. You don't pump out a 25-foot boat, really. I mean, that often. You could if it had a head. That's one thing. I think it's, whatever the dock is now, 100 feet or whatever, you know, it should stick with what it is. It's an environmental disaster to go into that seagrass that you can see right in front of you. That's all. There's more to this than just a little dock for a condominium owners. It's a little deeper than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard who has not had the opportunity to do so? I'm so sorry. Did I not go through them? Oh, please. Well, let's.
5 of us left to speak.
I'm so sorry?
There's at least 4 or 5 of us.
Okay, let me see. I have different stacks here. Is Peggy Duncan, is that one who's here? Please come forward.
She would just like you to read her comment.
Okay. I am against giving any waivers to the Alba residences. Our children use the sailing club to learn how to sail. The dock will be too challenging for them. Mary Murphy? Murphy? Do you wish to be here? Come forward, please, ma'am. I want me to read your comment instead. She wrote something on the back. I disagree with the proposal for more major waivers. Charles Hoffman.
You can read my comments as well.
Okay, sure. I am against requested waivers for items 4, 5, 6, and 7. Tatiana, I remember your first name. Why don't you go forward? Steve Allen? You already heard, thank you. That's what I was looking for with the cards earlier. Steve, there's another Annabelle, something along those lines. Do you want me to read your comment, sir? Okay. I am opposed to this dock extension and do not believe the original rules should be waived. This is a historic area and this lagoon is fragile. And I think this is the last comment and the last card I have. Is it Angela Olburn? Do you wish to be heard or do you want me to read your comment? Okay, why don't you go ahead, Tatiana.
Hello, Tatiana Mikolenko, 4911 North Flagler, about 1 block down from this development. I'm against all the waivers because this is a historical single-story neighborhood. You drive through the neighborhood, almost all the houses are single-story. Giving them all the waivers, taking a dock that's 100 feet and making it 220. We have manatees one of the biggest manatee centers right down the street from us. We have seagrasses growing. We have baby sea turtles all through Osprey Park right now on a daily basis. This will be really bad for this area to be dredged. It will be horrible for us, for one. 2, as far as the landscaping setbacks, we walked that street about 21, 22 years ago. Flagler got shrunk from a 4-lane to 2-lane. We have sidewalks. We went and hand planted hundreds of trees where they want to take out some of this stuff. That's 2 of those trees that they want to take out were trees that were planted with city grant money to replant the canopy that got taken out when the city decided to change the street 20-something years ago. The waivers for the landscaping buffer, that's not fair to all the people that live right across the street or next door. There's buffers and set designations for a reason. There's people that live all around this. These waivers are outrageous. It's all for them to have more money in their pocket. What about our homes we grew up in? We don't want to look at all this. And I'm sorry that FP&L thinks or that it can't go where their building is, but that's not fair to us. Just because they want to move their FP&L to the street, that we have to lose more and more of our street in our walking area and have to have worse landscaping, that's not okay. I'm really against all the landscaping waivers and the setback waivers. That's not fair. This is a single-story historical neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Angela Ogburn. First of all, thank you, everybody. I know it's late. I know we're tired. I do need you to think about these setbacks and about the dock. We have a sailing club that's been there for 25 plus years, right? And 50, and they're ready to celebrate their anniversary. There's lots of children who sail in this area. We're bringing in more boats. We're bringing in commercial yachts. There's a lift station for it. There are turtles. We have like daily between Osprey Park and Gettler Park, we are seeing like 10 turtles. And we've got the youth turtles. We've also got the juvenile turtles. I mean, we have the manatees that stay all year round now. They don't just, so we have turtle grass and we have manatee grass. So that needs to be thought about. You know, eventually they will be expanding their property. I know we're not about that here tonight, but maybe something else can be worked out with the buffer zone and the transformer toward the street. We don't want to lose our grant money trees. We love our canopy. Northwood Harbor is very unique in that way because many of our streets do have canopies, tree canopies. That's not usual in most streets. Anyhow, thank you for your patience. I really think you need to think about the dock being at 100 and not at 122 feet. Thank you.
Now, is there anyone else I missed who wishes to be heard?
Any ghosts?
And if not, I'll give you a chance. I just have a question first of staff. The building itself has been approved, hasn't it? That's not before us?
Yes.
Okay, so to be clear, for those who have concerns about the scale of the building, that's not before us. The city commission has already approved that building. So I just didn't want you to think we're ignoring that issue. Mr. Nichols, you want to come forward and respond to some of the issues that have been raised?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I guess to the point of backup documentation, as the board probably knows, you know, we just didn't show up tonight, you know, saying that we haven't studied any of this information. All these information, the environmental studies, the seagrass surveys, the navigational is all on file with the city. It's on file with Army Corps of Engineers, and it's also on file with the DEP. So all that stuff is available, and I'm happy to pass on that information between now and City Commission to the neighborhood to get them a comfort level. And I'm sure,
Mr. Nichols, if you could explain for us as well as for them, what goes into this process to get these approvals?
well, first off, the seagrass study. The seagrass study, there's only a 3-month window that the seagrass study can even happen, which is during the summertime, because that's the maximum amount of light that happens. So that has to be done first. Then that gets put up to the DEP as well as the Army Corps of Engineers to confirm that the disruption that there is not has an environmental impact. As part of our permitting, there are requirements for manatee posting, how they can even construct the piles and put the docks in place. So there's a lot of standards and conditions of approval for even constructing this. The docks do have a pump out station, and that's because it's required by code. So in terms of environmental spills, we don't want that. Anything over, I think it's 4 docks requires a pump station to be provided for the docks. So that's why that's on there. And yes, electric will be provided to these boats. The slip area is about 40 feet long between slips. So you're going to have smaller boats only going to be able to navigate these with lower thresholds and lower clearance boats. So you're right, it's not going to be certainly yachts pulling up in here. And I'm sure if the neighborhood, the neighbor owned out 200 feet in the water, they would want to utilize, their lands for a dock as well. The waivers, I mean, I felt that the waivers were pretty minor. Our air conditioners are a foot longer. We do have a recommendation, or consistent with our neighbor, approving that. So we did reach out, and I have Keith Spina here that I'd like him to kind of close with the issues that we've had with FPL. When we came to this board, we had an approval from FPL. Their requirements changed. They want them serviced from the right of way. So we've done everything we can to make sure that the landscaping is screening these issues, and they would come onto site and service them from the back instead of servicing them from the highway. Any tree removal, the trees have to be mitigated for. Unfortunately, one of the trees that were placed is right in the safe sight line. So when we exit the property, it's sitting in a safe sight line, and it'll have to be replaced. Again, I'm happy to meet with the neighbors on whatever, species they want and location for those replacements. They are on the landscape plans to be addressed. But again, I'm happy to go out to them and make sure we're getting them as much as we can. With that, I just will bring Keith up here to kind of talk about the 8-month negotiation with FPL and why the transformers are there, which has been kind of a domino effect that we had them both together along our north property line. We've had to now put one, a larger one in there, and then it was a domino effect shifting our driveway down, which is the new waiver for the driveway separations. So I'll let Keith answer that.
Good evening, Keith Spina, O'Rourke. I am the architect for the project. I've been working on the project, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 years now. Excited about it because the guy who bought this property, Kenny Baboon, the developer, when he bought it, he said, or when he came to us and he said, well, what can I build here? I said, I don't know, we hopefully do something a lot better than what was approved previously. It was a pretty mundane looking building. And I said, we'll have to go through a process and get it approved. He says, well, I bought the property already. I said, we have no idea what you can build. And he said, have you seen the property? The reason I'm sharing that is his passion for this piece of property, the natural resources that are there, the manatees, the turtles, the seagrass. There isn't anybody that I can think of that's as passionate as Kenny is about this. So some of the comments, they're not representative of our client. With regards to the transformers, John kind of summed it up. We had designed the building. We'd worked closely with our engineers, with FP&L. We had transformers located on the north side of the property. We had them going kind of east to west along the, parallel to the side of our building. We had it approved. We had it, ready to go, and FP&L had some change in staff. Came and then started, and I have the kind of the chronology of it. From when we thought the FPL transformers were approved by FPL, we started a conversation after that on July 28th of 2022, and we continued to work until October 6th of 2023, back and forth with FPL, with our engineers, until they finally told us we had a plan. We kept moving the transformers around the property, and they finally said, let us make it real clear. They put big red X's, said you're not going to put them here, and then they put big red squares and said this is where they will go. Now, if you look at the site plan, the transformers are now at the front door of our building. They're screened and landscaped from the public right-of-way. So we're, not very happy about the location either.
At the end of the day, doesn't FP&L get to make that decision?
What's that?
At the end of the day, doesn't FP&L get to make the decision where the transformers
someone kind
are?
of hinted at it. You either put them where FPL tells you to put them, or you don't have power. It's not a big
I can
debate.
open my store.
Yeah, we went as far as trying to keep pole-mounted transformers. The property just, I think, to the south of us has pole-mounted transformers, and they're staying. That's kind of somewhat of an older approach to location of transformers. Now they're pad-mounted. Helps during hurricanes and storms to retain power. But it was an exhaustive process. We do not like the fact that transformers are in front of our building, but we worked through a process over a couple year period of time where we had worked in good faith designing them, and at the end of the day, FPL has very clear requirements for service, and you have to be able to pull a truck up next to the transformer and service it. And that's kind of the criteria that ended up evolving and placing them where they are. But if you're walking by this building when it's completed, we've gone to great lengths to landscape in front of the transformers so that, and again, if you walk around almost anywhere in town, and if you look hard enough, there's transformers everywhere. And they're treated in a way that it's a...
Nothing you can do.
It's a necessity. It's unfortunate, So I think our client has guided us and we've done it as well. We've gone through great lengths to be very thoughtful in the placement of these. So,
okay. Thank you. Okay, let's bring it back to the board for discussion. thoughts?
I think it was Mr. Nichols that pointed out that all these documents are public records, and if anyone in the public wants to access them, they could either search or do a public records request. I think what's compelling in this case is that this property is dealing with submerged land, number one, and number two, it seems as if the dock extension is online with properties that are in the immediate vicinity. And number three, I would say it looks as if the shoreline is recessed, and so it doesn't go as far out as the properties to the north and a couple of the properties to the south. Those are my thoughts.
You know, we made a commitment when we come on this board to be governed by competent, substantial evidence that's presented. I do not doubt the sincerity of some of the people we spoke, but with respect, we don't have the competence to look at a picture and say from that picture, well, the seagrass studies must have been wrong. The Army Corps of Engineers must have been wrong. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection must be wrong, because here's a picture that would suggest something different. We don't know. We had to base it on evidence. And the evidence before us from the experts that the state provides, who study this, who looked at the seagrass studies and other things too, have come to a different conclusion. That's the evidence before us. That's the evidence that we have to be governed by. I will say this, because we've had our share of these types of issues. We learned in the course of this from some experts who also testified and other things. I just have by way of background, not that it influences my decision here, that sometimes if you care about the seagrass, if you care about the environmental things, you have to put the boats much further away from the shore. That was not intuitive to me, but I'm saying that's what we have heard testimony on in the past. The fact that the experts here have come to that conclusion is the competent, substantial evidence that we are obliged to follow when we make our decisions, whether you think it's a rubber stamp or not. We're governed by evidence. Those are my thoughts. Other thoughts? And if not, we'll look for a motion.
Somebody else.
Either way, we just need a motion so we can move forward and leave here before midnight.
All right, so I move that the planning board recommend to the city commission approval of the planning board case number 1887A, a request by Schmidt-Nichols on behalf of Scuba Club WPB LLC for a major amendment to the Alba Residences residential plan development with waivers to allow for changes to the approved site plan and to construct a dock that exceeds the length of 100 feet maximum of the subject lot located at 4714 North Flagler Drive. The motion is based upon testimony presented at the hearing, along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitute competent substantial evidence. The planning board hereby makes findings of fact that the application complies with the required standards in section 94-32, 94-36E and 3 through 5, and 94-313A3 of the City of West Palm Beach Zoning and Land Development Regulations, ZLDRs.
We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Oh, wait, we have conditions,
With
right?
conditions.
So I have to read in the conditions. In addition, this recommendation is made subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report dated November 21, 2023. I move that these conditions are necessary to ensure compliance with the purpose and intent of the zoning and land development regulations and consistency with the comprehensive plan of the City of West Palm Beach.
Thank you. We have a motion. Have we a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, that brings us then to new code revision cases, of which there are none. Other business, unfinished business, new business, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.